Chapter 556. There are not many pictures recorded in this thing, but it is very interesting. Since it was left to him by Su Buwang's biological mother. Su Li flicked her fingers, and the opposing blood bead turned into a bloody light and fell into Su Buwang's hand. She said meaningfully, "It is returned to its original owner." Hearing this, Fang Yuan's pupils shrank slightly. "You said that the opposing blood bead not only passed the memory to Buwang, but also recorded the previous pictures?" Su Li nodded with a smile, "Of course. Otherwise, how can I know the news of the owner of this thing?" Su Buwang was a little confused. His divine awareness subconsciously integrated into the opposing blood bead, and he immediately saw many details that he had ignored before, including the yin-yang jade face, and his mother finally gave everything to him, including the opposing blood bead and her life. It turns out that the yin-yang jade face is the token of love he gave to my mother. Su Buwang was inexplicably depressed. He always thought that the man had never regarded him as a son, but now he found that there was a subtle discrepancy with his image in the past. "Buwang, can I have a look?" Su Buwang came to his senses and saw everyone's nervous expression. After a moment of silence, he waved his hand to show the picture. After 1,000 years, everything that happened in the center of the tactical matrix of Tianjue covering hundreds of meters was finally revealed. Su Li's choice, Su Li's quarrel with Qi Xianqing and others. Everything was trivial, and even the conversation could be faintly distinguished from the mouth shape. Everyone couldn't help but stand up and stare at the picture in the image. Only Su Li sat on one side, holding her chin. She seemed to be a little bored, but there was a slight light flashing at the bottom of her eyes. The image projected at this moment was not the original one of the opposing blood bead, but the memory she put in later. The image was very short. After 10 minutes, the picture disappeared. There was silence in the room. Everyone had different expressions, but without exception, they all had a trace of sadness. Fang Yuan took a deep breath and said, "There is only the opposing blood bead left in Wang's body. His spiritual root can only be said to be medium. The foundation of the tactical matrix of Tianjue is gone. It seems that someone has done something to it. What kind of place is Shengtian Shrine?" Su Qinghao sighed. Su Buwang smiled foolishly. "I only know that it is full of blood, and people die every day. I don't like it at all. The memory of the opposing blood bead is incomplete." After that, Su Li disappeared and didn't appear until the reincarnation mirror broke. Where did she go? Ling Mo frowned tightly. The mystery of Su Li's life was still unsolved. Master left everything to little Master. She doesn't have many days left to live. She probably found a place with no one around. Yunyi choked with sobs, and he couldn't continue. At this point, no one was in the mood to continue chatting. They all cupped their fists and left in 2s and 3s. Su Buwang sat in place in a daze, and his eyes were a little confused. He came out to find his mother, but in the end, this was the result. Next, what should he live for? Su Li got up and walked to the door. She looked back at Su Buwang and paused for a few seconds. Finally, she made up her mind and turned to go out. She didn't dare to comfort Su Buwang for fear that she would tell him if she couldn't bear it. But that wasn't a good thing for everyone. Fate Su. Su Li's eyes were cold. She went downstairs while thinking. She saw Haydn and others busy with all kinds of files. Seeing Su Li coming, Haydn came to her and saluted. He said with a smile, "Are you the new Lord Qingshui?" Su Li nodded slightly. She pointed to the file in his hand and said, "Can I have a look?" "Of course." Haydn quickly handed over the file. Su Li took it and looked at it. She was surprised. It's the format of Tianyik Attic. Our intelligence agency of the Linli building imitates Tianyik Attic. Haydn said proudly, "No one can imitate the intelligence system of Tianyik Attic since ancient times. Our Linli building is the first." "Then where did you learn this intelligence system?" Su Li smiled faintly. Haydn was speechless. This, he didn't know. But this woman just joined the Linli building. It was not appropriate to tell her. "Well, I won't embarrass you." Haydn didn't answer, and Su Li didn't care. After returning the file to him, she said casually, "How much information have you collected about the Tianjiao battle?" Seeing that she changed the question, Haydn breathed a sigh of relief and said quickly, "The Tianjiao battle will start in a month or two. We also attach great importance to it and try our best to collect information." As he said, a manservant brought up a whole plate of jade slips and put it on the small table in front of Su Li. "These are all. Lord Qingshui, you can sit down and read them slowly." Su Li responded. Haydn saluted and left. Then he turned to do his own business. Su Li sat down, picked up 2 jade slips and glanced at them casually. She looked thoughtful. These were indeed the information of the Tianjiao battle, and they were the same as what Xianan said at the beginning. The information was more detailed, but, seeing that Haydn was on guard against her, these jade slips were definitely not all. Thinking of this, Su Li smiled and released her divine awareness. In the blink of an eye, she scanned all the information on the jade plate into her mind. She was in the nature soul realm, so she naturally didn't need to read slowly like other practitioners. After sorting out the information for a moment, Su Li suddenly opened her eyes, and a black light flashed in her eyes. "Is it set on September 15th? There are still 1.5 months left." At dinner time, Su Li received an invitation from Fang Yuan and came to the attic in the back hall. As soon as she entered the room, she smelled the fragrance of food from the spiritual chef. "Sister, you are here. Today is a welcome banquet for you." Su Buwang walked over and smiled a little reluctantly. Su Li smiled gently, touched his hair, and walked in. Fang Yuan, Ling Mo, and others were already there, and the host seat was empty. "Fellow Daoist Qingshui, today is your banquet. Please take a seat," Su Qingtan said slowly. Su Li nodded with a smile without any bashfulness. She sat in the middle naturally, and Fang Yuan and Su Buwang were on her left and right sides. Su Li picked up the wine cup and stood up. "It's my honor to enter the Linli building today. I propose a toast to you first." She raised her head and drank up. Then she poured the wine cup and glanced at everyone. "And to you, after 1,000 years, you are still fighting for me. Fellow Daoist Qingshui is really straightforward. I also propose a toast." Yunyi raised his cup and drank up happily. It was rare to see such a clever and straightforward female practitioner in the cultivation circle. What's more, this person's cultivation was so high that she was stronger than anyone present. This reminded him of his master at that time, to Miss Qingshui. Fang Yuan raised his cup. "To you." Ling Mo's eyes were sincere. At least at this moment, they really needed to thank each other. "To Sister Qingshui for saving my life many times." With gratitude in his eyes, Su Buwang drank up the wine with both hands. Su Li smiled and drank a few more cups. She faintly had a feeling of returning to the past. But the past was the past after all. After a round, she put down the wine cup and said in a relaxed tone, "I don't know, what do you think of the Tianjiao battle?" "Tianjiao battle?" Su Qinghao seemed to think of something, and his eyes lit up slightly. "May I ask how old you are, fellow Daoist Qingshui?" Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly and said with a chuckle, "Within 1,000 years, more than enough to participate in this Tianjiao battle." "Wow." Su Buwang widened his eyes and looked at Su Li incredulously. "Sister Qingshui, you are even younger than me. It's incredible. There are always people in the world who can't be judged by common sense." Ling Mo put down the wine cup and stared at Su Li with burning eyes. In the cultivation circle, this kind of people are usually called Evilders, who are even above the talent. "Qingshui, are you an Evildor?" As Ling Mo's words fell, the atmosphere at the table became subtle, and everyone looked at Su Li differently. A living Evildor was simply a miracle. Fang Yuan looked serious, and his eyes fell on Su Li's delicate side face. The word Evildor was more like a legend in today's cultivation circle. It was said that those horrible existences who could become emperors in ancient times were all extraordinary since childhood, and they showed extremely horrible cultivation talents and speed. Among them, the great emperor of Lihan was the most Evildor. It was said that when he was born, the whole world was dyed blue, and the starry sky fell with rolling tides, as if the universe was turned upside down, which was really shocking. Later, the great emperor of Lihan built foundation at the age of 3, reached Yuanying realm at the age of 7, reached the realm of nature's test at the age of 30, and stepped into the realm of junior emperor at the age of 45. After that, in just 5 years, he broke through to the realm of great emperor, and became the youngest emperor in the history of Qingshui Circle. After that, Qingshui Circle ushered in the reign of the great emperor of Lihan for nearly 10,000 years, and the calendar was changed to Qingshui. Since then, nothing had changed. Ivildor? Su Li tucked her hair behind her ears and smiled shyly. If you say so, I will be shy. Although I have some talent, I am still far from being an Ivildor. As soon as Su Li said this, the atmosphere suddenly eased a lot. Ling Mo slightly relaxed his eyebrows. The appearance of an Ivildor was always accompanied by disasters. The Linli building struggled to survive for nearly 1,000 years. Now it just got better, but it couldn't stand the torment. Fellow Daoist Qingshui, to tell you the truth. Su Qingtan's voice was clear and bright. He cupped his hands and said, we did arrange a lot of spies to participate in the Tianjiao battle, but all the talents of Qingshui Circle gathered there. We have no chance to snatch the luck from those holy sects, and we need a leader. Now, if you are willing to go, it will be the best. Yes. Su Qinghao followed his brother's words and nodded cautiously. If you are willing to go, few people in the entire Qingshui Circle can compete with you with your strength. It will be easy for you to win the first place. Speaking of this, Su Qinghao was suddenly stunned. What was the difference between the number one of the talents and an Ivildor? Su Li slightly narrowed her eyes and showed a look of contemplation. After a while, she raised her head and said slowly, I know that your identities are sensitive, and I am unfamiliar with you. Even if I show my face in front of those holy sects, no one knows who I am. It happens that I haven't been to Shengxian Mountain, and I am very interested in it. So, I agree. But... Su Li's eyes suddenly became sharp, and she glanced at the crowd. All the secrets about the Tianjiao battle, I hope all the former talents of holy sects can tell me truthfully. I never do things that I am not sure about. Chapter 557. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading, I promise you. Fang Yuan, who had been silent for a long time, finally said, we come from various holy sects, and the records of the Tianjiao battle are almost the same. But since you want to know all, we will tell you all we know. It seemed that this woman was not from a holy sect. Ling Mo's eyes flashed. He figured it out and relaxed. Since he wasn't from the sage sect, it was unlikely that he was their enemy. Furthermore, which enemy would allow such an outstanding cultivator to be a spy? If he was the sect master of the sage sect, he would hide such a person as fast as he could. How could he expose him in advance? That's good. Su Li squinted and chuckled. After the banquet, Su Li was led by a manservant to live in the boutique house of the Linli building, Qingshui Garden. The name of the house was newly changed. It was originally uninhabited. The real estate in Ju City was very rare, but it was not difficult for the Linli building. Su Li followed the manservant to walk around the yard. The yard was not big, but it was very clean. The floor made of low-level spiritual wood was so bright that it could be seen in a mirror. Walking into the central hall, Su Li was slightly satisfied with the elegant layout. She sat down on the soft couch and said softly, "You can leave." "Yes." The manservant quickly saluted and left. Only Su Li was left in the room. She waved her hand, and 8 jade slips of different sizes appeared in the air. These were the jade slips of the Tianjiao battle that Fang Yuan and others gave to her. What was the difference between the Tianjiao battle in the records of the holy sects? She believed that no one had tried to gather the records of many holy sects before her. This was the unique advantage of the Linli building. Taking a jade slip, Su Li immersed her divine awareness in it. After a while, the jade slips burned into ashes. Su Li slowly closed her eyes, and a lot of information was integrated in her mind. After a while, Su Li suddenly opened her eyes, and her eyes were gloomy. The records of the holy sects were indeed different. Fang Yuan came from the top holy sect, so the information should be the most complete. But the details were also different from those of other holy sects. However, no matter how different they were, they all mentioned the same person. The great emperor of Lihan. Su Li narrowed her long and narrow eyes slightly. It was not the first time for her to hear this name, but her understanding of the great emperor was only limited to his name. It was not until now that he knew that the calendar of Qingshui Circle changed because he was born with a strange phenomenon. It turned out that he was the first great emperor since ancient times. Great Emperor Lihan had two great treasures, the Lihan sword and the Lihan tablet. Both of them were supreme treasures. However, after Great Emperor Lihan fell, these two treasures were not left behind. Instead, they disappeared. Why? The message left by Fang Yuan flashed in Su Li's mind. The cultivation world had no lack of mysteries. The history of the prodigy role is even longer than that of Emperor Lihan. I don't even know who left the Black Lotus behind, but it actually has a trace of the Heavenly Way's karmic luck, which is distributed to the prodigies according to their ranking on the prodigy roll, protecting them from dying prematurely. It sounds like it's a magic treasure left behind by a powerful sect to nurture their disciples during the age of all spirits. It can steal karmic luck from the Heavenly Way. Her soft laughter echoed in the room. Interesting. Time passed unconsciously. More than a month had passed in the blink of an eye. In the past month, Su Li spent most of her time wandering in the Linli building. When she encountered any injustice, she would help. She won the favor of many disciples of the Linli building. Ling Mo and others were also much closer to her. Qingshui, it's almost time. On this day, Ling Mo found Su Li and said in a serious tone, "We still have time to meet with the members outside." Su Li nodded gently. She looked at the clothes of the Linli building she wore and said, "I'm going to change clothes. You take advantage of this time to summon the disciples who are going there." Ling Mo responded, and a touch of worry flashed in his eyes. All the holy sects in the entire Qingshui circle gathered in the Shengxian mountain. If Qingshui's identity was exposed, the consequences would be unimaginable. On the other side, Su Li returned to her residence and just changed into the original heavy soul robe and put on the veil. Su Buwang broke in. "Sister." Su Li's eyes flashed with tenderness, and she said in a teasing tone, "Our young lord is here." "I'm Qingshui. Greetings, young lord." "Oh, sister, you are still joking at this time." Su Buwang's face was slightly red. "Are you leaving now? To the Shengxian mountain?" Su Li nodded slightly. "It's less than half a month before the start of the Tianjiao battle. It's time to go." "Sister," Su Buwang looked worried. Even if his sister's cultivation was extremely strong, there were many strong people there. The Linli building was full of enemies. His sister couldn't fight against so many people. This trip was extremely dangerous. "Don't worry, little fool." Su Li approached and lowered her head to adjust Su Buwang's collar. "Sister, you know what kind of place the Shengxian mountain is. Since the natural law is covered there, the deduction skill can't work. As long as you hide your strength, you don't have to worry." Su Buwang responded in a muffled voice. After hesitating for a moment, he took off the young jade mask on his arm and put it in Su Li's palm. "Sister, this thing can be integrated into the face and change the appearance. No matter how advanced the pupil skill is, no one can find the abnormality. I can rest assured if you take it." Su Li was stunned. Looking at the familiar and strange young jade mask in her hand, she was silent for a moment, and suddenly laughed with a faint light in her eyes. "Okay, sister, take it." In the front hall of the Linli building, Fang Yuan sat quietly on one side of the table. Ling Mo stood in front of the elite disciples wearing various casual practitioners' robes. 12 Numas, each with their own strength. You are all the elites carefully selected by the Linli building. It's inevitable to fight hard in the Shengxian mountain this time. Go all out. Ling Mo's words echoed in the room, powerful and resonant. Standing in the front, a young practitioner with a slightly dark complexion and a handsome face stuck out his chest and said loudly, "We will not let Lord Sin down. We will not let Lord Sin down. We will not let Lord Sin down." Everyone shouted in unison. Ling Mo nodded with relief. The elites he worked hard to cultivate finally had a day to use their martial arts. "Lord Sin, I, Jiang Run, have doubts in my heart. I don't know whether I should ask." The young practitioner suddenly said in a neither humble nor arrogant tone, The Tianjiao battle is a grand event in Qingshui Circle for 1,000 years. We must treat it with caution. But why don't you let Lord Fang Kun, who is powerful and destroyed the Bloody Circle, take part in it? Instead, you let Lord Qingshui, who has just joined the force, go? How dare you? Ling Mo frowned. Jiang Run immediately took a step back, bowed with hands folded, and saluted. I'm presumptuous. I'm also worried about the Linli building. Lord Qingshui is really a good person. Since she joined the Linli building, she has solved a lot of small troubles for the disciples. We admire her. But she is gentle and kind. If she wants to fight with the practitioners of the holy sects, it's really inappropriate. Fang Yuan stopped drinking and witnessed this scene. A strange expression appeared in his eyes. Qingshui, gentle and kind. He admitted that Qingshui had some kindness in her heart, but gentle. How could he see it? Whether it was to destroy the Bloody Circle or to solve the ghosts in the Yangji Desert, her means were not gentle at all. Ling Mo was even more speechless. The destruction of the Bloody Circle was only known by a few people, and he personally ordered the blockade. The Tianjiao list was of great importance. Naturally, the fewer people knew Qingshui's strength, the better. Unexpectedly, these 12 melons dared to rebel. How can you refute the decision of the high level? Ling Mo waved his sleeves, turned around, and said coldly, if the time is limited, you have already been punished in the crack of the Yang pole. Jiang Run's neck shrank back when he heard the words crack in the Yang pole, but his eyes were still filled with unwillingness. Fellow practitioner Sin, don't embarrass the young man. He is also for the Linli building. Su Li walked lightly and leisurely, followed by Su Buwang, who looked reluctant. When Jiang Run saw her, a trace of awkwardness flashed across his face. Everyone hurriedly bowed. Greetings, Lord Qingshui. Greetings, young master. Don't stand on ceremony. Seeing that Su Li was not angry, Jiang Run breathed a sigh of relief, but his disappointment deepened. Lord Qingshui's temper was really very soft. Su Li narrowed her eyes and glanced at the 12 young figures. Her lips moved slightly, and she transmitted the sound, they are all good seedlings. It's very dangerous for me to take them to Shengxian Mountain. Are you willing to do that? Ling Mo looked serious and replied, the rise of the Linli building must be paved with blood. It can't be avoided. But you have to do everything according to your ability. Come back alive. Where there is life, there is hope. Not to mention the kindness of destroying the blood circle, Qingshui was now the strongest person of the Linli building. He was a trump card, and they couldn't afford to lose him. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Su Li smiled slightly and walked to Fang Yuan. She picked up a cup of wine that had already been filled. She put it to her lips and sipped it. Then she said to Fang Yuan with a smile, I won't drink before I leave. I'll invite fellow practitioner Fang when I come back. Fang Yuan was stunned, and then the seriousness in his eyes faded away. He rarely said seriously, see you. Su Li's eyes flashed, and her cup gently touched the cup in Fang Yuan's hand. See you. See you. After a while, Ling Mo took Su Li and others to the underground of the headquarters of the Linli building. After walking to the end, a huge and complicated transmission matrix came into view. Su Li's eyes flashed, the ancient transmission matrix. Qingshui, you have good eyesight. Ling Mo nodded. The environment outside the Yin-Yang territory, whether it is the Yang Pole Desert or the Yin Pole Swamp, is too bad. Only with this transmission matrix can we transmit messages to the outside world. However, this transmission matrix consumes an astronomical number of celestial stones every time a practitioner is teleported. If it is not necessary, it will never be opened. While talking, Ling Mo had walked to the front of the transmission matrix and put the last celestial stone in the groove. With a roar, the entire transmission matrix suddenly lit up. Su Li looked indifferent and stepped into it without saying anything. Jiang Run swallowed his saliva and followed her. Like the other 11 people, he couldn't help looking forward to it. Qingshui, the place after this transmission matrix is in a sect of the Sword Sect. There will be someone to contact you and arrange the next trip. Sect of the Sword Sect. Su Li nodded slightly, I see. Whoosh. The transmission matrix shone brightly and was finally fully opened. After the light dissipated, there was no one in the matrix. Under the dim spiritual stone lamp, half of Ling Mo's face was hidden in the darkness, looming. I hope you are not an enemy. Chapter 558. Jiuli Region, Wanjian Sect, the top secret place. When Tingshan stood quietly in front of the transmission matrix with his hands clasped behind his back. His face was carved with the traces of time. He looked more vicissitudes than before, but he was still tall and straight like a sharp sword, soaring into the sky. Behind him, there were 4 practitioners, 3 men and 1 woman. They were all young, and their cultivation was in the early stage of Yuanying realm. Master, what are we waiting for? Ying Qiaoa, the only female practitioner among the young practitioners, asked in a low voice. She had never seen her master being so serious. Although the Wanjian sect was a small sect in the eyes of other sects, as direct disciples, they naturally knew some secrets of the Wanjian sect. For example, the head of the Wanjian sect. Their master's strength was much higher than that of the lords of those small sects. At least he was in Huashan realm. Another example was that the cultivation resources of their sect were much more than those of other small sects, so they didn't have to compete for those barren spiritual minds. However, in order to maintain the image of the sect, the master had to go out every time to put on a show, which was very hard. This time, the 4 of them actually found that there was a transmission matrix in their sect that only those big sects had. Although they didn't recognize that it was an ancient transmission matrix, they were surprised. Their sect was really full of secrets. Don't ask too much. The people coming are all your senior fellow apprentices and senior sisters. We belong to the same sect. Remember. When Tingshan told the 4 people, it seemed that he felt it was inappropriate, so he added, like you, they are all disciples trained by the Wanjian sect. They have lived in the Wanjian sect since childhood. Do you understand? I understand. The 4 people could be the direct disciples of Wen Tingshan, so they were naturally smart. Their eyes flashed, and they responded in unison. Buzz. Suddenly, the quiet transmission matrix made a buzzing sound, and the bright white light rose. Wen Tingshan's face slightly froze. Who would lead the team this time? They are coming. Ying Qiaoa murmured, staring at the matrix with her bright and round eyes. Wow, the light faded, and there were 13 people in the matrix. So many people. The other 3 direct disciples of the Wanjian sect looked at each other and saw the surprise in their eyes. The number of disciples trained secretly was twice as much as that of direct disciples. It seems that our Wanjian pavilion is most likely a foreign sect of this force. I don't know how this force compares with the Jiguang sect. Cheng Sheng, the chief pro-disciple of the Wanjian sect, thought so. The 13 people in the tactical matrix had already approached Wen Tingshan. Fellow Daoist, are you the one who has come to receive us? Su Li was not surprised to see Wen Tingshan's face. As early as when Ling Mo said sword sect, she guessed that it was probably the Wanjian sect. The information given by Hua Yang briefly recorded this. The Wanjian sect was a small sect in Jiuli region. It was founded 1,000 years ago. Because its disciple married into Jiguang sect, ordinary sects didn't dare to offend it. So, it had existed to this day. He even used the original name. What a big heart. While Su Li was thinking, Wen Tingshan frowned. The leader was a strange woman. He had never seen her before. Did something happen to Ling Mo? Could this person be trusted? Lord Myriad Swords, so it's you. Seeing that the atmosphere was getting more and more solemn, Jiang Run stood out from behind Su Li and saluted with his hands folded. He said calmly, I am Jiang Run. When Tingshan looked a little relaxed and said, it's you. How is your master recently? Master is doing well. Jiang Run nodded with a smile and continued, this is Lord Qingshui. She just joined us recently. The news in Jueqing and the outside world are not spread fast. Lord Myriad Swords, you probably haven't received the news yet. I see. The vigilance in Wen Tingshan's eyes faded a little. He saluted with his hands folded and said, my name is Wen Tingshan. I am the owner of the Wanjian sect. Su Li saluted and said in a gentle tone, I am Qingshui. I am new here. If I offend you, please forgive me, head Wen. Wen Tingshan frowned slightly, but didn't show any other expression. He nodded and continued, I have already discussed with him about the Tianjiao battle. Fellow Daoist Qingshui, can you be the elder of the Wanjian sect for the time being? I understand. Head Wen can arrange it at will. That's good. Let's go out first. Time is tight. 2 hours later, the spiritual boat of Jiguang sect will come here and take us there. Wen Tingshan simply said and turned to go out. There was a sense of resoluteness both inside and outside. Just at the moment when he turned around, Jiang Run's mind suddenly sounded a question. Jiang Run, let me ask you, who made the decision to lead Qingshui? Jiang Run subconsciously lowered his head and secretly transmitted the sound, it's the master. Su Li listened to the transmission of sound between the two without showing any trace. Wen Tingshan's soul realm was not as good as that of Tian Hun. In addition, Jiang Run's cultivation was low. It was easy for her to eavesdrop on the transmission of sound between the two. However, she only listened for a moment and then withdrew her divine awareness. Wen Tingshan mostly asked about her origin, and Jiang Run couldn't answer. At most, he said something like Lord Qingshui is not suitable, which was meaningless. It was really meaningless. Wen Tingshan thought as he walked. The Wanjian sect had been hiding in the dark. This time, they sent 17 people to the Tianjiao battle, which was extremely high profile. It was impossible to send more people, and there was no suitable candidate in the Wanjian sect. In this case, he could only believe in Ling Mo's choice. Fellow practitioner of the Wanjian sect. Suddenly, Su Li's voice sounded behind him. Wen Tingshan slowed down and immediately retreated to walk side by side with Su Li. He asked in a deep voice, fellow practitioner Qingshui, what can I do for you? I don't deserve any advice. Su Li smiled, the Wanjian sect is not a big sect. It's not appropriate to send 17 people to the Tianjiao battle. Wen Tingshan stopped and looked at Su Li inexplicably. How could she know that this was the Wanjian sect? It was absurd enough for Ling Mo to let this girl go to the Tianjiao battle. She even told him all the information of the outside world. Tell her. A newcomer who had just joined for a month. Fellow practitioner, don't think too much. Su Li chuckled and said in a free and easy tone, I think, it's better to send at least half of the people to join the team of Jiguang sect. We can say that they are disciples secretly trained by Shen Jingju, which is less likely to attract attention. Jiguang sect, they even told you this? Wen Tingshan said slowly, and his right hand hidden in his sleeve quietly made a gesture. Do you mean fellow practitioner Sin? Su Li didn't seem to notice Wen Tingshan's movement. She shook her head and smiled. No, I just happened to come to Jiuli region before joining your noble house. It was very lively that Su Yu joined Jiguang sect. After I joined your noble house, I naturally thought of it. I see. The gesture in Wen Tingshan's sleeve dissipated, and he said expressionlessly, next time, please make it clear, so as not to cause unnecessary misunderstanding. Su Li narrowed her eyes and nodded gently. Wen Tingshan took a deep look at her and turned his head, let's go. The spiritual boat of Jiguang sect is waiting. Jiang Run saw that the two seemed to be at odds with each other. He felt ashamed and hurriedly transmitted the sound, Lord Wanjian, although I think it is not appropriate for Lady Qingshui to go to the Tianjiao battle, she is by no means an enemy. Lord Wanjian, please don't be prejudiced against Lady Qingshui because of my words. Boy, it's none of your business. Don't worry. Wen Tingshan comforted him casually. He still didn't let go of his suspicion. Only 1 month was too short. If Qingshui deliberately hid, what could others see? Although he didn't know why Ling Mo was so assured about this woman, he had to be responsible for the Linli building. After a while, they walked to the end of the stone path. Wen Tingshan waved his sleeves and swept out a blue light. Whoosh, the stone door slowly moved, and the beautiful green landscape came into view. On the huge platform not far from the stone door, a spiritual boat with a height of several meters was quietly parked. When the stone door was opened, several streams of light rushed out of the spiritual boat and fell in front of everyone. After the streams of light dissipated, an old man with a goatee and a fierce face, wearing a cloud pattern robe of Jiguang sect, showed up. Lord Wanjian, I am honored to meet you. When Tingshan saw him, his face was slightly relaxed. He also held his fist and said, "It turns out to be Elder Hua. Thank you." The old man with a goatee showed a smile, which affected the wrinkles on his face. His fierce face made his smile extremely ferocious. I have to do my last effort for the sect before my bones rust. Jiang Run and the others felt their hearts skip a beat. Compared to Lord Qing Shui's gentle and beautiful appearance, wouldn't Elder Hua's face be enough to scare a lot of people? Elder Hua, you are too serious. When Tingshan smiled faintly and stepped aside, these are the 4 personal disciples of my Wanjian sect. This time, you will take them to Shengxian Mountain to see the world. As for this is Qing Shui from the Holy Land. This time, he will lead 12 people to join Jiguang sect. Elder Hua, please arrange a position for him. Tingshan thought for a long time, and finally didn't add fuel to the fire, but told the truth. When the old man with a goatee heard it, he suddenly looked serious and solemnly held his fist and said, I am the 4th elder of Jiguang sect, Hua Shichun. Lord Qing Shui is very polite. Su Li nodded gently, and her gentle voice came out from under the veil. This time, please take care of me, Elder Hua. Of course, of course. Hua Shichun laughed and waved his hand. Let's go as soon as possible. If we are late, I am afraid that there will be no place to live in Shengxian Mountain. Okay. When Tingshan nodded and turned to Ying Qiaoer and the other 3, you should listen to Elder Hua all the way. Don't make trouble for Jiguang sect, understand? I know. The 4 people responded in unison, but Elder Hua felt strange when he heard it. Shouldn't they listen to Lord Qing Shui? Let's go. Su Li suddenly said, and Hua Shichun immediately came to his senses. He quickly bent down and beckoned with his hand, saying, please come with me. As he said, Hua Shichun first turned into a flowing light and flew to the deck of the spiritual boat. Under his operation, a hole was opened in the protective cover outside the spiritual boat. Without hesitation, everyone immediately flew into it. When Tingshan walked to the bottom of the spiritual boat and fixed his eyes on the people on the deck of the spiritual boat. Don't trust Qing Shui too much. If there is any abnormality, you can act according to the circumstances. When Hua Shichun, who was controlling the tactical matrix of the spiritual boat, heard this, his pupils suddenly shrank and his mind was shocked. He almost fell into the spiritual stone box. Even the Lord of the Holy Land couldn't be trusted. What was going on? If you want to talk about the poisonous wife with more like-minded people, please follow You Read Literature on WeChat. Talk about life and find bosom friends. Chapter 559. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Buzz, the tactical matrix of the spiritual boat shook slightly, and then it flew away like an arrow leaving the bow. When Tingshan turned back to the sect with a cold face. If the Jiguang sect was really exposed, they needed to be prepared in advance. At this moment, Jiang Run and others were on the deck of the spiritual boat. They had never been out of Ju Town. It was the first time for them to take the spiritual boat, so they felt fresh. They stayed on the deck and looked at the scenery in the clouds outside, unwilling to leave for a long time. Su Li didn't stop them. She turned her head and asked, Elder Hua, where do I live? Hua Shichun was shocked, but he didn't show it on the surface. He said with a smile, Lord Qing Shui, please wait a moment. I will take you there. Su Li nodded slightly. A moment later, Hua Shichun stopped in front of an extremely remote room on the 2nd floor of the spiritual boat. He said cheekily, this is your residence. The spiritual boat is small, so this is the only place left. Please forgive me. Su Li glanced at Hua Shichun with a faint smile. The latter suddenly sweated on his forehead. When he was about to say something, Su Li nodded and said, this is a good place. I like quiet. There is one more thing to remind Elder Hua. Don't call me Lord. This is not the Linli building. Hua Shichun suddenly felt the pressure and nodded repeatedly, it's my negligence. I won't bother Elder Qing Shui. Su Li said softly, If there is nothing important, don't come to me. I am in the dark, and you are in the light. It is more convenient to do things. After all, I will also participate in the battle. After saying this, Su Li opened the door and walked in. Huo Chun was stunned. With a bang, the door was closed. Huo Chun woke up with a start and looked confused. Lord Qingxue was a senior of the Linli building. How could she participate in the Tianjiao battle? Then wouldn't her age be? He was getting more and more confused. Half a day later, everyone on the deck finally saw enough and returned to the room arranged on the first floor of the spiritual boat. Only Huo Chun was left to guard the tactical matrix in front of the deck. Not long after, the door in the middle of the second floor of the spiritual boat opened. Xianan walked out, stretched himself, and jumped to Huo Shishun's side. Huo Chun smiled bitterly. Young lord, how many times have I said that jumping on the spiritual boat is forbidden? This is the rule of Jiguang sect. Xianan smiled. There are only you and me here. Will Elder Huo complain to my father? Huo Shishun's smile became even more bitter. Of course not. That's good. Xianan shook his head indifferently. I heard that someone from the Holy Land came today. I just finished practicing and came out. Why didn't I see him? Huo Chun nodded. They are indeed here. They are resting in their rooms. Hearing this, Xianan became energetic and asked expectantly, who is the leader? Is it the strongest Sin? After taking over part of the Jiguang sect, he accidentally broke into his father's adytum, and finally came into contact with the core secret of the Jiguang sect, Linli building. In these files, what he saw most was nothing more than the strong people of the Linli building who only had a name. Among them, Sin was the most common. After seeing what Sin had done, Xianan was already a fan of Sin. If it weren't for the high price of the teleportation matrix, he would have flown to Ju City to see his idol. Huo Chun laughed in his heart and shook his head. Lord Sin needs to govern the Holy Land. How can he have time to come out? The leader of this trip is named Qingxue. She is a female practitioner. You may not have heard of her. Ah, how could it be? Xianan was immediately disappointed, and he didn't even want to visit her. Forget it. After the Tianjiao battle, the people of the Holy Land will inevitably open the teleportation matrix. I can go to the secluded place of the Wanjian sect. Huo Chun just listened and didn't say a word, but he sighed with emotion in his heart. It was good to be young. Su Li was in the room, but her divine awareness covered the whole boat. The scene of Xianan appearing naturally fell into her eyes. Has this kid already come into contact with the Linli building? She frowned. It's too early. How dangerous it is to let him go to the Tianjiao battle. What does Xian Jingju think? After thinking for a moment, the fluctuation in her eyes faded, and she meditated again. There were still 2 days to go to the Shengxian mountain. The sun set and the moon rose, and the sky gradually darkened. Huo Chun sat cross-legged on the deck and stared around without sleeping. The law of the jungle in the cultivation circle was the truth. As long as the strength was strong enough, there were no rules to speak of. So, naturally, many practitioners took the crooked path. On this day, he had scared off many evil practitioners who wanted to kill and seize treasures with the reputation of the Jiguang sect. However, in Jiang Run's view, the other party seemed to be more because he saw Elder Huo's face. He came to help several times because of the evil practitioners, but every time he saw the face outside the spirit boat, it was not half as ferocious as Elder Huo. Perhaps appearance was also an advantage. Jiang Run touched his face, and all kinds of strange thoughts flashed in his mind. Are you Jiang Run? Perhaps Huo Chun was bored, so he asked in a low voice. Jiang Run nodded and said, I am Jiang Run. Why don't you go rest? It's very boring to guard an ugly and old man like me. Jiang Run smiled and said, this is the first time for me to carry out a task, so I have to be responsible and not let master down. Who is your master? Huo Chun was a little curious. Jiang Run immediately straightened his back and said solemnly, my master is not anyone else, but Sin. Huo Shishun's eyes brightened slightly, and he said with relief, the Holy Land has a successor. Senior, you flatter me. I still need to learn more. Jiang Run said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Hua Chun was about to continue speaking, but his expression suddenly changed. He pinched the incantation with both hands, and the entire spirit boat's protective shield instantly doubled. Boom! There was a loud noise in the night sky, and the spirit boat shook violently, making a sound of being overwhelmed. Even if Hua Chun temporarily increased the defense, it still couldn't withstand the shockwave, and shattered into powder, turning into sparkles and falling down. What's going on? Enemy attack, get out. Everyone instantly woke up, rushed out of the room, and gathered in front of the spirit boat. Old Hua, what happened? Xian'an walked to Hua Shishun's side, glanced at Jiang Run with extraordinary temperament, and asked with a frown. Young lord, it's not good. Hua Chun gritted his teeth and stared at the dim clouds ahead, and his tone was indescribably dignified. Ha 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 ha. However, at this moment, a burst of wild laughter accompanied by dozens of figures appeared from the clouds. It wasn't destroyed by the spirit extermination cannon. This is a top-grade spirit boat. Boss, you really have sharp eyes. You've caught a big fat sheep at once. As they spoke, the figure approached. Hua Chun and others finally saw the person who was dealing with them, and they were all shocked. Black clothes and black hat, with a bloodline on his forehead, this dress, it's the Dark Blood Bandit. Someone from the Jiguang sect exclaimed, with a trace of uncontrollable horror in his voice. Dark Blood Bandits. Jiang Run and others were at a loss. For the forces outside the Yin-Yang region, except for the holy sects, their experience was almost nothing. All blank. Sure enough. Hua Chun sighed in a low voice. Their luck was really bad. In this case. His eyes were cold, and he seemed to have made up his mind. He quickly transmitted the sound, young lord, Jiang Run, find a chance to escape with people. What? How do we know if we don't try? Jiang Run was shocked. Before he finished speaking, he heard the Dark Blood Bandits outside the spirit boat took out a pitch-black flute and said with a grim smile, kill them all, leave no one alive. In an instant, dozens of black shadows rushed out like lightning and fought with many disciples on the deck. Seeing the black flute, Hua Shishun's face changed greatly. Oh no, it's the blood demon flute user. We must not let him play the demonic sound. He made a gesture with both hands, and the flying sword rushed out. But halfway, it was caught by a big hand and broken. What? Hua Shishun's pupils shrank suddenly, and he was shocked. Then he noticed the burly man standing on the edge of the spirit boat. He grinned and sneered, don't take out this kind of toy to make a fool of yourself. The physical practitioner could break his flying sword with one hand, at least in the middle stage of nature's test. The other person could play the blood demon flute, at least in the early stage of nature's test. The strength of the Dark Blood Bandits was so high that it made people desperate. Jiang Run glanced at the deck and didn't see Su Li's voice. His eyes slightly sank, and his figure disappeared into the nothingness. Old Hua, don't panic. Xian'an snorted coldly. Countless small golden swords appeared around him out of thin air on the sword rune on his neck. They connected into a golden line and shot through the burly man's chest in the blink of an eye. It was too fast for people to react. The burly man groaned and stepped back a few steps. He looked at the golden swords floating around Xian'an with fear. The owner of this sword rune could hurt him, which meant that the cultivation of the owner was higher than him. He could only wait for the boss to take action. Puff. But at this moment, a clear sound of the blade piercing the flesh came into the ears of the burly man. The burly man suddenly turned back, only to see that Jiang Run had touched the back of the blood demon flute envoy. He pierced the latter's pubic region with a sword and sneered, want to play the demonic sound? Did you ask me? Seeing this scene, Xian'an was surprised and delighted. Old Hua, who is he? He is so powerful. Old Hua was ashamed and gratified. The new generation excels the old. The disciple of Lord Sin is really extraordinary. I see. Xian'an's eyes brightened slightly. He, who admired Ling Mo very much, was not surprised. The blood demon flute envoy lowered his head and saw the blade in his pubic region dripping with blood. After a moment of silence, he suddenly laughed in a low voice. Jiang Run's face changed slightly. What are you laughing at? The blood demon flute envoy slowly raised his head, and the bloodline on his forehead suddenly burned. I laugh at you. You don't know it until you die. Boom. The monstrous demonic energy broke out. Jiang Run bore the brunt of it, but he had no time to avoid it. He was hit directly. He looked up and spat out a mouthful of blood. Then he flew straight back and smashed a large number of houses on the spirit boat. Damn it. You actually let the boss use the blood curse. Do you really think I can't deal with you? The burly man was furious. His clothes burst apart, and his body size increased 3 times. He smashed the golden sword around him into pieces with one punch. Crack. A crack suddenly appeared in the sword rune. Xianan was frightened, but he did not retreat. His hands made the sword gesture at the fastest speed in his life. In an instant, hundreds of small golden swords attacked and temporarily entangled the burly man. Ha 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 ha. The feminine figure of the blood demon flute envoy walked out of the demonic energy. The bloodline on his forehead had disappeared. He put the flute to his mouth, and his soft tone made everyone's hair stand on end. All of you, go to hell. Chapter 560. 34 Chinese Language Network, wonderful pop-up window free reading. In the ruins of the spirit boat, Jiang Run coughed up blood incessantly as he struggled to prop himself up. He looked at the battle on the deck, then at his companions who had come out with him. They were all in imminent danger. His heart sank, and his eyes were filled with unwillingness. How could they die here before they arrived at Shengxian Mountain? He carefully looked at all the people in the field again. After confirming that the figure was not there, he was suddenly stunned. Was Lady Qingshui from the Dark Blood Bandits? Otherwise, how could she not appear when the Dark Blood Bandits intercepted her? The more Jiang Run thought about it, the more he felt that it was the truth. He couldn't suppress his anger and growled, Qingshui, silly boy, what are you thinking about? Suddenly, a familiar and gentle voice appeared in his ears. Su Li's figure gradually solidified. Jiang Run's angry face suddenly froze. Before he said anything, Su Li shook her head and sighed. Refining things is really troublesome. Such a big movement. Before he finished his words, Jiang Run saw the figure beside him suddenly disappeared and appeared in front of the messenger of the bloody flute in the blink of an eye. Who is it? The messenger of the bloody flute didn't even see the figure clearly. He felt numb on his scalp. When he was about to make a move, the bloody flute appeared in his opponent's hand. An evil practitioner? Su Li's fingertips touched the black flute and it was plated with a layer of silver light. She squinted her eyes and threw the flute. It suddenly turned into a silver light and pierced the heart of the burly man at a speed that was hard to be seen by the naked eye. Blood spilled in the void. The burly man covered his chest and looked back to see a woman beside his leader. He was frightened. He had used his unique skill. How could his defense be broken? How dare you destroy my flute? You're courting death. The messenger of the bloody flute shouted ferociously. His 5 fingers turned into claws and the demonic energy surged. He grabbed Su Li's face. I'll use your head to refine my flute. Su Li tilted her head slightly and dodged his attack. Her slender and white palm directly grasped his hand and exerted force. A series of cracking sounds sounded and the palm of the messenger of the bloody flute was crushed into pieces. Someone like you dares to covet my life. Su Li ridiculed him with a smile. The messenger of the bloody flute was terrified and screamed incredulously, how is it possible? You are not afraid of the demonic energy. Puff. A head flew high into the air, and blood spurted out for several zhong. Su Li stretched out her hand and grasped in the air. The head and body of the blood flute envoy suddenly burst into blood mist. A transparent figure with a frightened face floated out of it, but he failed to escape. Hong Baizhu seized the opportunity to take him into Kang Lei's cave. Boss. The burly man was shocked and angry, but he did not lose his reason. He immediately ordered, retreat. Everyone retreat. Scatter and run. He fiercely stamped his feet and instantly rushed out several hundred feet away. Su Li flashed back to the front of the spiritual boat. Seeing the scattered Shuin bandits, she curled her lips and said, how dare you run away in front of me, As she thought of this, her eyes suddenly lit up, and she glanced at it lightly. Instantly, peng, 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 peng. Dozens of blood flowers bloomed in the air at the same time. All the fleeing cultivators of the dark blood bandits exploded into a mist of blood before they could even scream. After finishing this step, Su Li withdrew her hand and said indifferently to the people standing on the spiritual boat, "Elder Hua, you can repair the spiritual boat first. I will be back soon." As she said, her figure disappeared like a ghost again. On the other side, the burly man covered his chest and did not dare to relax. He used all his strength to escape desperately. In just a few blinks of an eye, he had escaped hundreds of miles away. "Since you are here, why leave?" Suddenly, a soul-stirring voice sounded behind him. The burly man instantly had goosebumps. He turned back and put his hands in front of his chest. The golden light of body refining shone brightly. In the next moment, 2 arms were cut off by the sharp sword light. They were thrown high and sprinkled in the air with blood. "Your little body refinement cultivation isn't worth mentioning in my eyes." Su Li tilted her head and smiled, as if she was talking about something unrelated to life and death. "There are few practitioners of body refining in Qingshui Circle. It is rare to see one. How about I send you to hell with real body refining?" "No." The burly man screamed in horror and wanted to escape. Su Li punched out and instantly annihilated the man along with the surrounding void. Only the cracked black flute was left floating in the air. It didn't break. Su Li was slightly surprised. She waved her hand and the flute fell by itself. It was cold and light to the touch. It weighed about 50 kilograms. Su Li couldn't see anything special about it. She put it away and looked at the broken spiritual boat in the distance. Her smile suddenly disappeared. "Black Lotus, I trusted you too much. I asked you to keep an eye on the outside when I refined the external incarnation. Why didn't you tell me when the dark blood bandits attacked?" The black ring appeared between her fingers. Black Lotus showed up reluctantly. He shrank his neck and didn't dare to look at Su Li. Could he say that he didn't like Jiang Run and wanted to teach him a lesson? After all, Jiang Run was almost killed. If he said it directly, Su Li might use the divine thunder to wake him up. Su Li snorted coldly, "Tell me the origin of the dark blood bandits, and I won't hold you accountable for your negligence." Black Lotus didn't dare to hesitate and immediately said honestly, "The dark blood bandits. I have never heard of them. Maybe they are an evil force that has risen in the past 10,000 years. I have some memory of the method of blood burning they used just now. It's a method of evil practitioners called Blood God One-Line Sky. Many evil practitioners' sects in ancient times could use it. Among them, the Shuetian sect used it the earliest and best. There was a great emperor in the sect. I don't know his specific name, but he should not be a powerful figure." "You don't even remember the name of the great emperor?" Su Li raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "No wonder you don't care about me, who is just a character in Junior Emperor." Black Lotus was in a cold sweat and said with an embarrassed smile, "Master, I dare not. There were at least thousands of great emperors in ancient times. Only the strong ones could be immortalized. The others couldn't stand the erosion of time and are now reduced to dust. Who can remember them except their descendants?" Speaking of this, Black Lotus paused and said sadly, "Whether they are in Junior Emperor or Great Emperor, they are still mortal and will grow old and die. The real strong ones, such as the woman you saw in Chuangxing Path, are extraordinary and immortal-like figures. They will not die for tens of thousands of years, and even live as long as heaven and earth." Su Li narrowed her eyes. "Have you seen them?" "Of course." Black Lotus nodded proudly, his eyes filled with reminiscence as he lamented, "The era of the myriad spirit calendar was the time when cultivation was at its peak. There were many immortals out there, and even more who lived in seclusion. But later, those immortals all disappeared." "Why?" Su Li still wanted to continue to ask, but Black Lotus pointed to the spiritual boat at this time and said with a hollow smile, "Look, the spiritual boat has been repaired. Let's go back quickly." Su Li took a deep look at Black Lotus and stroked the Black Lotus ring with her fingers. "One day, you will be willing to say it." After that, she waved her sleeves and floated back. Black Lotus shrank back into the ring space and patted his head madly. Then he couldn't help but slap himself. He raised his head and let out a long sigh. When could he change? The habit of disaster comes from the mouth. Su Li's figure floated to the bow of the spiritual boat, and the people waiting on the deck immediately stood up and surrounded her. Lord Qingshui. Jiang Run dragged his seriously injured body and walked over. His pale face showed shame. He bowed his head and said, Silly boy, you are also thinking for the sect. I have never blamed you. This time, I was negligent and almost caused a disaster. Su Li shook her head and said. After passing through a green spiritual light, Jiang Run suddenly felt a warm current flowing through his meridians and his injury was almost healed in the blink of an eye. Brother Jiang Run, are you okay? Ying Chaoa was so shocked that her mouth opened slightly. She looked back at Su Li with admiration in her eyes, and her little stars almost overflowed. Not only did she kill decisively, but she also mastered excellent medical skills. There was such a perfect female senior in the world. She was even better than her master. Lord Qingshui would be Ying Chao's idol from now on. Jiang Run moved his right hand away from his aching chest and couldn't hide the joy on his face. He quickly knelt down and saluted. Thank you for healing me, Lord Qingshui. It's okay. Go back and have a good rest. Su Li said and turned her eyes to the others. And you, all of you are more or less injured. Go back and heal your injuries quickly. You must return to your peak state before the Tianjiao contest. As for the rest, Su Li's eyes swept over everyone and her red lips opened slightly. It's okay with me. As soon as she said that, all the young practitioners present were suddenly warmed up and responded in unison. Yes, Elder Qingshui. Huisha Chun was very fast. The spirit boat's cabin had already been repaired, and everyone returned to their rooms one after another. Jiang Run was the last to leave. He turned his head back to look at the calm black phantom on the deck, and he suddenly understood something that his master had once said. There is always such a person who will make you want to listen to her orders. It is not only because of her strength, but also because of her personality. In the blink of an eye, only Huisha Chun was left on the deck with a distressed expression. No, there was one more. Su Li raised her lips and chuckled. My good brother, do you still want to hide and not come out? Huisha Chun was confused. Brother, was she calling me an old man? Before he could ask in doubt, a figure rushed down from the second floor. The surprise and doubt in his eyes disappeared, and he said with surprise and excitement, Sister, it's really you. This. Young lord. Huishishun's eyes widened. The young lord actually knew Lady Qingshui and called her brother and sister. I guarantee it's real. Su Li gently tidied up Xianan's messy hair, but there was a hint of blame in her tone. How can your father be willing to let you take risks? And you even joined the Leanly building? I must find him later to settle accounts. No. Xianan suddenly shivered and said embarrassedly, I accidentally turned over the confidential file. This time, I also sneaked out. I don't believe that the lord of a sect with eyes all over the Jiuli region doesn't know that you sneaked out. Su Li snorted coldly and turned to glance at Huisha Chun. You are also responsible for this matter. Yes, Huisha Chun nodded and suddenly fell silent. He was forced to hide his whereabouts by the young lord. How could he be scolded by the lord of the Holy Land? Thinking of this, Huisha Chun suddenly felt extremely wronged. Chapter 561. 34 Chinese Net. In 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Huisha Chun pouted his mouth like an oil bottle. Coupled with his ferocious and horrible face, it was so incongruous that Xianan was speechless. Even Su Li's eyes twitched when she saw it. She said, forget it. It's not convenient to investigate it now. When will the spiritual boat restart? Huisha Chun didn't dare to be angry. He quickly calmed down and said with embarrassment, Lord, the driving core of the spiritual boat is not damaged, but the matrix of Hunyuan Ju shield set on the spiritual boat is as high as the 9th grade. If there is no high-grade matrix to protect it, the wind pressure at high speed will destroy the spiritual boat in an instant. But if the speed is low, We can't get to the Shengxian mountain in time. What should we do? I don't know the matrix of Hunyuan Ju Shield. Su Li's words made Hu Shishun's old face suddenly gloomy, and the unrealistic hope in his heart was also broken. Lord Qingshui's figure was full of youthfulness. His cultivation was so high that he must be a top figure among the talents. He focused on cultivation, so how could he be distracted by the tactical matrix? However, I can give it a try. As soon as the words came out, Hu Shichun was stunned. Lord, you. Before he could ask, Su Li threw out a ownerless flying sword with a light cyan halo. Your flying sword was destroyed, and you were hurt. Go back to the room first and come back in 2 hours. Hu Shichun subconsciously took over the flying sword. When he came to his senses, he was shocked and stuttered. This is a precious weapon. Oh my God. Xianan was not surprised. His sister could even give him the extremely valuable poisonous power insect, so she was naturally rich. He immediately smiled and patted Hu Shishun's shoulder. Thank me quickly. You didn't lose this time, did you? Yes. Hu Shichun woke up and quickly cupped his hands and bowed deeply. Thank you for your gift, Lord Qingshui. It doesn't matter. Su Li waved her hand casually, and her eyes fell on Xianan. The latter immediately scratched his head and said, I'm going back to practice. Sister, you are busy. He naturally knew that his sister not only had unfathomable strength, but also had many secrets. She was definitely a big shot. Since his sister didn't want others to know some things, he certainly had to be a good example. This subordinate will take his leave. Hu Shichun retreated happily, and Su Li was left alone on the bow. Su Li walked to the wooden disc that controlled the tactical matrix and sat down cross-legged. Her palm swept over the first tactical matrix, and the black light rune flashed away. Hu Shichun is right. The core is intact. All we need to do is add a defensive array rune. As Su Li thought, her fingertips brushed over the scorched second disc. A layer of sawdust was immediately shaved off the surface, revealing the original snow-white wood color. Su Li was surprised. It is a 1,000-year-old spiritual wood, which can support the tactical matrix of the 11th grade. Unfortunately, the surface of the spiritual wood is too small. Well, that's it. Thinking of this, Su Li picked up the spiritual pen for repairing matrix, and deductions appeared in her eyes. In an instant, runes appeared on the spiritual plate, and some fell down like black snowflakes. 4 hours later, Hu Shichun came back sweating profusely with the flying sword that was initially refined. Lord Qingshui said 4 hours, and he couldn't be late. But when he came to the bow of the spiritual boat, Su Li was nowhere to be found. Hey, Lord Qingshui? Hu Shichun patted his head. He wanted to change the best room on the spiritual boat for Lord Qingshui, but he didn't see him. He muttered and walked to the spiritual plate. He inadvertently glanced at the brand new black rune on the spiritual plate on the right, and he was instantly stunned. A new tactical matrix pattern? He hurriedly sat down to check. Although he couldn't tell what kind of tactical matrix was on the spiritual plate, the new tactical matrix pattern was integrated and far more complex than before. It was not drawn blindly. Lord Qingshui is proficient in tactical matrix. Above the 9th grade, isn't it? Hu Shishun's eyes widened. The more he thought about it, the more shocked he was. But his hands didn't stop, and he continued to fill the core of the tactical matrix with spiritual stones. 5 minutes later, boom, the spiritual boat soared into the sky, and the transparent light shield instantly lit up. The reaction speed is 3 seconds faster than before, and Hu Shichun swallowed and controlled the spiritual boat to speed up. The light shield was motionless, and it was much more stable than the previous 9th grade tactical matrix. It is really a 10th grade tactical matrix. Hu Shichun confirmed his thoughts, and he was even more shocked. He looked back at the secluded closed door on the 2nd floor. He had never heard of such a powerful female practitioner, let alone seen one. Those talents in holy sects were no better than her, right? Could it be that the Holy Land was comparable to holy sects? Then this Tianjiao battle, Hu Shichun was shocked, and suddenly a thought that he didn't dare to think about before arose in his mind. In the following time, the spiritual boat encountered several waves of bandits, but they were not troublesome, and Huashichan sent them away. After just one day, everyone finally entered the ascending immortal domain. The ascending immortal domain was extremely small, with a radius of only 100,000 miles. Compared with other domains that easily covered millions of miles, it was extremely pocket-sized. There were no sects in the ascending immortal domain. Except for the wilderness, there was a high mountain in the center that went straight into the clouds, and the top couldn't be seen. It was the famous ascending Immortals Mountain. In the ancient stone quarry halfway up the ascending Immortals Mountain, there was a mottled stone wall. From a distance, it looked like a rag hanging on the mountainside. If no one introduced it, no practitioner who came here for the first time would know that the famous Tianjiao list in Qingshui Circle was that rag. "My lord, we have arrived at the ascending Immortals Mountain." The sound came faintly from outside the door. Su Li slowly opened her eyes, and the jade light flashed away. Feeling the vigorous and surging power in her body, she murmured in a low voice, "The peak of Yuanying realm." After breaking through the Chuangxing path in Jiuzhou region, Su Li's cultivation went straight from the early stage of Yuanying realm to the peak of Yuanying realm within a month, without any hindrance. Su Li was not surprised about this. The realm of her soul and strength exceeded her cultivation too much. For her, the Yuanying realm could only be regarded as a quantitative accumulation, which was not difficult. The Chuangxing path has now become an obstacle to my cultivation. Su Li frowned. Indeed, every time she went to the Chuangxing path, it took her too much energy, and she was in danger every time. However, she did not regret it. Wasn't the strength and foundation that far exceeded her cultivation realm exchanged for the Chuangxing path? However, I have to speed up. Otherwise, if my strength reaches the realm of the Great Emperor, I have to break through my cultivation realm, be reborn, and become an immortal. But my biggest problem now is not the Chuangxing path, but... Su Li spread out her palm, and a wisp of green flowed through her palm. Sueyu tactics. This mental method could indeed be called the ancient treasure. Just practicing to the second level could help her avoid the harm of the natural law. But it was too time-consuming to explore it without knowing the secret. And what she lacked most was time. It is said that the ascending Immortals Mountain is also left in the ancient times. I don't know if I can gain anything. Su Li withdrew her palm and heard the call outside. She changed into the disciple uniform of Jiguang sect, covered her face with a veil, and got up to open the door. "Lord Qingshui! Lord Qingshui!" When everyone saw Su Li, they all showed awe and saluted. Especially Huashichan, his attitude was even more respectful. "Don't stand on ceremony." Su Li's sleeves fluttered in the wind, and a virtual force suddenly passed through them and lifted them up. "Don't be so polite. This trip is led by Elder Hua. Don't expose yourself." Su Li walked to Xian En and glanced at everyone in the field. Her voice was gentle. "If someone deliberately leaks the secret, you know the punishment better than me." As soon as these words came out, Jiang Run and others' pupils shrank, and they all agreed. The disciples of Jiguang sect and Wanjian sect also nodded. Seeing Su Li's dress, Elder Hua understood the reason. He was shocked that Su Li really wanted to participate in the Tianjiao battle in person, but he also said with a smile, "Lord Qingshui saved our lives in the battle of the Shuayin bandits. How can we not follow what you said?" "That's good." Su Li's tone contained a smile, but the obscurity in her eyes was cold. It was time for holy sects to pay back their debts. After a while, the spiritual boat stopped at the foot of Immortals Mountain. Huashichan walked out with everyone. Looking up, they saw an endless stream of spiritual boats in the sky, like a meteor shower, landing everywhere in the wilderness. It's less than 10 days before the Tianjiao battle begins. The Immortals city must be full. Obviously, it was not the first time for Huashichan to come here. He took people to a huge and towering ancient city at the foot of the mountain with ease. Is there a city in the Immortals region? Xianan looked up at the city gate tower that was hundreds of meters high and exclaimed, "What a high city, much higher than the mountain gate of my Jiguang sect." The rest of the people also revealed looks of admiration. Not to mention the immortal Ascension Mountain that pierced the clouds, Just the height of the city was enough to make one admire it. Hee hee. Huo Chun said with a smile, this city is more than 5,000 meters high, and it is a relic of the ancient times. In Qingshui Circle, I am afraid that only the ancient everlasting city of Tianhe sect can be compared with it. All newcomers are shocked. As Huo Chun said, he saw more and more practitioners gathered in front of the city gate. He immediately waved his hand, let's talk about this after we enter the city. Go and line up first. Su Li followed the crowd and looked up at the obviously brand new city gate plaque. Her eyes were deep, and Black Lotus's endless shocked words came into her ears. What Immortals City? This is clearly the enchanting ghost city of our ghost clan, who named the Immortals Mountain. That is the mountain of the Lotus Immortal cult. Tianjiao list. Isn't that the Wangtian tablet of the primary Buddha ancient temple? The things of human, ghost and Buddhist sects come together and actually coexist peacefully? What a mess. Black Lotus was completely confused, and Su Li could understand most of it. Things of the ancient sects. Maybe there will be news of Sueyu tactics, and this ghost city. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she withdrew her gaze. She did feel an extremely weak calling force, but with the weirdness of the ghost clan, it was still debatable whether it was a blessing or a curse. The guards of the city gate were all maintained by the disciples sent by the Four Peaks. The sects of Qingshui Circle naturally did not dare to act rashly. The whole team advanced in an orderly manner, and the speed was not slow. About an hour later, the people of Jiguang's sect approached the city gate. Huo Chun was about to hand in the document of Jiguang's sect, but at this time. Chapter 562. A roar came from the far end of the sky, as if the thunder from the ninth heaven had struck everyone's heart. Those with weaker cultivation in the field immediately bled from their mouths and noses. Even Jiang Run and others felt that their internal breath was unstable and their blood was shaking. In just a few seconds, 4 magnificent palaces with different numas appeared above everyone's head. All the practitioners were suddenly shocked and made way for a large open space. Su Li retreated with others and watched the 4 palaces fall calmly. It's the Peak Holy Sect. Huo Shishun's pupils shrank suddenly and he exclaimed in a low voice. Are these the 4 Peak Holy Sects? The disciples of Jiguang sect muttered to themselves. It was the first time for them to see the Peak Holy Sects, so they inevitably lost their composure. The 4 people of Wanjian sect were not much better. However, Jiang Run and other 12 people had seen the bloody circle. Although they were amazed by the power of the Peak Holy Sects, they didn't show it on the surface. Huo Chun saw it and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. They really deserved to be from the Holy Land. Even the inherited disciples in the sect couldn't compare with Lord Qingshui. Squeak! At this time, the green door to the leftmost palace suddenly opened, and a cold-faced young man with an evil aura slowly stepped out. His eyes swept over the many cultivators, and a chilling evil aura spread out, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Behind him, many elders in green robes followed respectfully. The first holy son of Ankue Valley, Chu Qingning. He is the holy son of Ankue Valley. It is said that he is more than 1,900 years old. His poison skills are superior to his peers. After returning to the sect from the bloody accident of Holy Spirit, he has been silent for 1,000 years. His cultivation is unfathomable. Huo Chun secretly transmitted the sound to Su Li and other people from Juecheng. After all, in his understanding, people in Juecheng were too uninformed. It was always good to talk about the common sense of Qingshui Circle. Jiang Run and others didn't get to know the core of the Linli building, which was really an eye-opener. They couldn't help but nod secretly. Su Li remained calm and raised her eyebrows slightly. Is this the second test of Qiyu evil skill? In the reincarnation mirror, she once pretended to be Mr. Li and asked Ling Qinglan for the mental method of Qiyu evil skill. So, she naturally knew the bottleneck. If she wanted to practice this method, she had to get rid of 7 disasters first. The first one was desire. When she saw Chu Qingning in the ancestral land of the ghost clan, she noticed that he was no longer a virgin. But there was only a breath of a woman around him, and he controlled it quite well. It should be noted that Qiyu Shengong was cultivated in the reincarnation mirror, which was of the upper grade of the mysterious rank, and it was much easier. The reincarnation mirror played a big part in the success of his eldest brother. Now this method appeared in Qingshui Circle. Qiyu Shengong was a top mental method of holy grade. After a few years, Chu Qingning had crossed the first test and reached the second test, evil thoughts. The so-called evil thoughts were thinking about doing evil all the time. No one knew how Ankuei Valley suppressed it. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly. The holy sect was really not simple. But at this time, a white-haired old man in the Taoist robe of Ankuei Valley hurried to Chu Qingning in the Immortal Ascension City. He saluted and said with a smile, "Your Highness, I have been waiting for you for a long time." Chu Qingning snorted coldly, "10th Elder, I have stopped here for 3 seconds. You are late. How dare you stand to see me?" The white-haired old man's face changed slightly. He had long heard that the first holy son had made rapid progress in his holy martial arts and had entered the second stage. He was very grumpy, but he didn't expect that he was so bad. Before 10th Elder could think of a way to deal with it, the most luxurious and magnificent palace in the 4 major palaces slowly opened. 2 rows of beautiful and dignified maids walked out of it. They bowed their heads and stood silently on both sides. An exquisite woman with snow-white skin walked out slowly. Her golden skirt was dotted with starlight, flashing with unknown power. Behind her, a group of old women followed her. All of them had obscure breaths and were extremely horrible. Such a proud woman stunned the audience as soon as she appeared. But the coldness and indifference in her eyes made many practitioners not dare to look at her directly. They all looked away. This woman was Yin Xuetong, the holy girl of Huangxing Hall. The holy son of Ankuei Valley is still so unbearable. As soon as Yin Xuetong appeared, she did not forget to ridicule Chu Qingning. Her words were not polite. Chu Qingning didn't get angry when he heard the words. He turned his head and grinned, "Yin Xuetong, I know what kind of person you are. The pot calling the kettle black. How dare you say that to me?" Yin Xuetong looked calm, and her reaction was mediocre. It seemed that she had long been accustomed to Chu Qingning's way of fighting back. "Haven't you quarreled enough after 1,000 years? In the third plane and ancient palace, Fang Mu helplessly led a group of superiors of the Tianhe sect to descend. He was still a young man with red lips and white teeth. He looked calm and sharp. In the years after his eldest brother Fang Yuan left, he finally became a man who had completely sharpened himself. "Fang Mu, don't be a peacemaker." Chu Qingning frowned. "It has been 1,000 years. Are you still immersed in that dream and haven't woken up?" "Silly boy, you are as silly as your eldest brother, and your Tianhe sect. First holy son, be careful with your words." Before Chu Qingning finished his words, the first elder, who had the highest status behind him, immediately came out to stop him. The Tianjiao battle was imminent, and they couldn't have any disputes now. Any grievances could be left to the Tianjiao battle. "I know what I'm doing. I don't need you to remind me." Chu Qingning's face became gloomy. He waved his sleeves and swaggered into the Immortal Ascension City alone without waiting for people of Shengtian Shrine to come out. The first elder sighed secretly, but he didn't change his expression. He directly put away the palace and followed up with the crowd. Ankuei Valley is also a holy sect. How can there be such a foppish and rude holy son? It is said that his temperament changed greatly after that incident. "I see." Some people in the crowd secretly transmitted the sound, but as the last black palace opened, there was a dead silence in the field. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of footsteps approached, and then a tall and cold young man in a dark robe walked out from the darkness. Every single step he took seemed to have been measured, and it was extremely precise. A shapeless imposing aura instantly spread out to the surroundings. The elders and disciples of Shengtian Shrine who followed behind him looked awestruck and followed the crowd. "Here he comes. This is the first talent of Qingshui Circle, the first holy son of Shengtian Shrine." Although there was no battle in the Immortal Ascension Mountain in the last Tianjiao list, he undoubtedly ranked first on the Tianjiao list because of his horrible achievements. He is called Ling Li, the Emperor of Evil. Chun transmitted the sound in horror, which shocked everyone. His deeds can't be finished even if we talk about them for 3 days and 3 nights. Without his appearance, Shengtian Shrine would never be able to sit firmly on the throne of the first holy sect. Countless talents died in his hands, and even the talents of the holy sects were no exception. It is also rumored that he is indifferent and ruthless. Although there are 3,000 beauties in the imperial palace, he doesn't like children. Any child conceived by a woman will be executed immediately. Back then, during the bloody calamity of the divine spirit, he was even killed by him with his own hands. The title of demonic emperor is truly terrifying. Jiang Run's brows furrowed as he listened. He couldn't help but transmit the sound in silence. How can such an inhuman evil practitioner be allowed to reach the top? Doesn't the holy sects care about it? Chun shook his head and laughed. Boy, you are still too naive. Shengtian Shrine is an evil sect. There is no distinction between good and evil in the world. Jiang Run was speechless for a while. These discussions would not be passed to Ling Li's ears. He glanced indifferently at Yin Xuetong, who was expressionless, and Fang Mu, who had a complicated expression. Then he withdrew his gaze, put the temporary palace into his sleeve, and went into the city. What a boring person. Yin Xuetong muttered. She waved her hand and led people into the city one after another. Fang Mu, who fell last, was full of sadness in his eyes, but he soon cheered up and ignited the fire of fighting. He thought in his heart, Ling Li, in the Tianjiao battle, I will let you know that being heartless is not the right way. Su Li squinted her eyes and said nothing. What difficulties do you have? You would rather let Buwang suffer outside than keep him by your side. You even painstakingly set up a trap and spread so many false words. While thinking, Chun had already handed over the official document and called everyone to enter the city. Seeing this, Su Li stopped thinking and stepped up to follow him. After entering the city, Chun took everyone to the largest inn in Immortal Ascension City, Qianyekin. Most of the holy sects were stationed in Immortal Ascension City. Except for the most mysterious intelligence force in Qingshui Circle, there was no one else who could open a chain of inns in the city. Shopkeeper, we've booked a courtyard. Chun came to the counter of the inn and handed in the token. The cultivation of the shopkeeper of Qianyekin here was not much worse than his. The strength of Qianyekin could be seen. It turns out to be the elder of Jiguang sect. The shopkeeper took the token and immediately showed a kind smile. He glanced at the many young disciples behind him, and there was no lack of surprise in his eyes. He couldn't help but salute. It seems that Jiguang sect is expected to go further this year. I congratulate you in advance. Haha, it's hard to say. Chun couldn't help laughing. He knew that with Lord Qingshui, the position of holy sect was in the bag, but it was not good to show it at this moment. However, after these humble words were uttered, there were actually people who responded to him. It's really hard to say. How dare the little good-for-nothings of your Jiguang sect try to get the position of holy sect? As soon as these words came out, the expressions of everyone in Jiguang sect immediately turned cold, and they all looked back. Even the smile of the shopkeeper of Qianyekin faded a little. Su Li looked back and saw a group of practitioners in black and grey uniform Taoist robes step into the inn together. The number of young disciples was no less than 100, far more than the Lin Li side. When Chun saw the leading elder with golden eyebrows, his ferocious face suddenly became more terrifying. He said in a cold voice, "Traitor, how dare you appear in front of me?" Seeing this, the elder with golden eyebrows laughed, "Ugly Hua, you are still as superficial as before." No matter how superficial I am much better than you, a traitor who betrays the sect for glory. Chun looked cold, and his eyes were full of killing intent. If this place is not Shengxian Mountain, after the Tianjiao battle, you can't leave alive. I should say this to you, shouldn't I? The elder with golden eyebrows came to the counter with many disciples and took out a purple token from his hand. He glanced at the dim ordinary token in Hua Shishun's hand and sneered, "You probably don't know that your Jiguang sect is coming to an end, right?" When Chun saw the purple token, his face suddenly changed. Chapter 563. Holy Sect's Token? You. Hu Shishun's eyes widened. The golden-eyebrowed elder withdrew his hand and said contemptuously, "Cherish the last time. After the Tianjiao battle, our Splendor Hall will ascend to the position of a holy sect, and your Jiguang sect will be destroyed." Hu Shishun's face was extremely gloomy, and fear flashed in his eyes. The Splendor Hall and the Jiguang sect were both high-grade sects, and they were mortal enemies. There had been friction for thousands of years, and many geniuses had died in each other's hands. Now, the Jiguang sect suddenly had the holy sect's token. It must be supported by a holy sect. Although their Jiguang sect had a holy land, its grade was not obvious. In his opinion, the grade of the holy land was at most the peak of high grade, and it was still far away from the holy sect. "Oh, I was wondering who it was. It turns out to be Meng Bian, the old dog Meng, who I caught embezzling money and fled for fear of punishment." But at this moment, Xianan appeared behind Hu Shichun and smiled sarcastically. "Why? You flatter a new backer, and your dogtail is high again." The golden-eyebrowed elder was poked in his sore spot, and his face instantly became extremely ugly. Resentful words were squeezed out from his teeth. "Xianan, you little bastard. How dare you come here?" Xianan laughed and ridiculed. "Even you dare to come here, old dog Meng." "Why don't I dare? The trash that our Jiguang sect doesn't want actually became an elder in the Splendor Hall. It's really a veritable garbage dump. It's the most suitable place for you to go there." In the end, Xianan deliberately showed a look of amazement. All the disciples of the Splendor Hall were shocked and angry when they heard the words, and glared at him. "Little bastard. You are courting death." The blue veins on Meng Bian's forehead were exposed, and his eyes were red. He punched Xianan's cheek without saying a word. But before he punched halfway, he was blocked by a palm and couldn't move forward at all. In the Tianyik attic, no force is allowed. The shopkeeper slowly reached out and pressed Meng Bian's fist back. "Does the Splendor Hall want to break the eternal rules of our sect?" Meng Bian suddenly came to his sense, and suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly held his hands and said, "I dare not. Shopkeeper, please arrange a residence for me." The shopkeeper nodded and retracted his hand. "If not for the holy sect's keepsake, you would have been chased out long ago. For the sake of my Tianyik attic's reputation, I can't completely pardon you. The garden you booked is gone. Would you like to stay in a normal guest room?" Meng Bian's expression changed. "Shopkeeper, if you still want to talk about it, you can go sleep on the streets." The shopkeeper interrupted. Meng Bian's words stopped abruptly. His face turned green, but he did not dare to say another word. After going through the check-in process in a hurry, Meng Bian got the room plate. Seeing the people of Jiguang sect who were still watching the joke, he smiled coldly and said in a very gloomy voice, "Little bastard, no one will protect you in the talents battle. You will definitely die." Behind him, many disciples of the Splendor Hall looked at Xianan coldly, as if they were looking at a dead person. Xianan rolled his eyes. Meng Bian was afraid that he would get angry again, so he snorted and went upstairs directly. When they all disappeared into the staircase, the atmosphere in front of the counter immediately eased up. "Shopkeeper, thank you for helping me out." Hu Shichun hurriedly cupped his hands and said. The shopkeeper shook his head with a smile. "I just protect the face of Tianyik attic. You don't need to thank me. It's an honor that Elder Hu doesn't blame us for not treating our guests well." "What are you talking about, shopkeeper?" Hu Shichun was immediately flattered, but he was surprised. Did the shopkeeper see that Lord Qingshui was extraordinary? "Well, I am quite free now. I will take you to the spring court garden in person." The shopkeeper smiled. "Elder Hu, don't call me shopkeeper. My surname is Xie, and my first name is Wei. It turns out to be fellow practitioner Xie Wei. I am Hu Shichun." After they exchanged names, Xie Wei led everyone through the lobby on the first floor and walked to the depths along the clean and tidy stone-faced path. Su Li walked in the crowd, and a light flashed in her eyes. From beginning to end, she didn't show anything extraordinary, and she also noticed that the shopkeeper's eyes inadvertently fell on Jiang Run from time to time. Indeed, Jiang Run could become Ling Mo's personal disciple, so how could he be mediocre? His strength was so strong that he could rank in the upper middle of the Tianjiao list. Besides, he was very young and had infinite potential. In fact, Xie Wei did think so. Although the disciples of Jiguang sect were a little few, their quality was excellent, especially the young man in black, whose breath faintly reached the Tianjiao of the upper grade, which was rare in the upper grade sects. If there is no accident, Jiguang sect is really likely to win. On the contrary, although the Splendor Hall clings to the holy sects, the quality of its disciples, thinking so, Xie Wei stopped in front of a spacious courtyard. Although the spring court garden is not the best garden, it also has all kinds of fine products. You must be very tired after coming from afar. I won't bother you anymore. Goodbye. Huo Shichun hurriedly cupped his hands and watched Xie Wei leave. Wow! What a big and beautiful courtyard. It is more exquisite than the Zong Pavilion of our Jiguang sect. The disciples of Jiguang sect opened the door and looked at the scenery inside the door. They couldn't help but marvel. Ying Qiaoer and others from the Wanjian sect were even more excited. They quickly went in to choose the room they liked. This group of impudent people. Huo Shichun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Seeing Jiang run and others still motionless behind him, he nodded secretly. Then he transmitted the sound to Su Li carefully. Lord Qingshui, you live in the main room in the middle. No, I'll choose one at random. You live in the main room. Su Li shook her head gently and walked into the courtyard. Xian Anli followed her flatteringly. Huo Shichun understood the meaning and didn't refute. Now Lord Qingshui was a disciple. If he lived in the main room, it would inevitably arouse vigilance if it was leaked out. He had better be careful. There were 60 rooms in the spring court garden, and there were no more than 48 people in Jiguang sect. The rooms were extremely exquisite and luxurious. Except for the main room in the middle, there was no difference in level. After 5 minutes, everyone settled down comfortably. At the same time, on the second floor of the Tianyar Inn, Meng Bian opened the door and looked at the dozens of beds in the room. His face was so gloomy that it could drip water. Bastard! You've gone too far. You even let us live in the common room for servants. Zheng Shu, the first disciple standing next to Meng Bian, finally couldn't help it. He was about to go downstairs angrily, but was stopped by Meng Bian. Do you want everyone to sleep on the street? Zheng Shu stopped and suddenly turned around. He gritted his teeth and said, Elder, we are almost overtaken by those good-for-nothings in Jiguang sect. How can we bear it? A little impatience will spoil great plans. Meng Bian snorted and walked into the room. Come in. A man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. We are suffering now. In the Tianjiao battle, you have to pay back to Jiguang sect 1,000 times. They will all die. Zheng Shu took a deep breath and said in a fierce tone. He flicked his sleeves and stepped into the room. The rest of the people looked at each other and finally held back the grievance in their hearts. They walked into the room one after another. In the corridor, Xie Wei heard these words and couldn't help but shake her head. Where does your confidence come from? At this moment, another group of people swarmed in from the first floor. The leader was Ling Qinglan. Where is the shopkeeper? Coming. Xie Wei went downstairs and saw Ling Qinglan's face. Her pupils suddenly shrank. Yin tribe, Yimo? Ling Qinglan raised his eyebrows slightly and showed a very faint smile. I have not used that name for a long time. Now, please call me Ling Qinglan, Lord of Shengxian Horizon. Xie Wei frowned slightly. She took the token from Ling Qinglan's hand and bowed her head to make the room plate. She said carelessly, it seems that you not only survived successfully but also know a lot. There were many Tianyar Inn in Shengxian City, but there was only one lord of Tianyar Inn in each region of Qingshui Circle. He knew a lot about the Tianjiao of the bloody accident of Holy Spirit, especially the Yin tribe which had been destroyed not long ago. He originally thought that Yi Mo had already died with the destruction of his soul, but he didn't expect that he was not only alive, but also his cultivation didn't fall. He looked up at the people behind Ling Qinglan. They were all strange faces, but their pneumas were obscure and extremely extraordinary. The force of record of Tianyar Inn? Xie Wei was shocked and doubtful. When he saw the 3 words Jiuzhou region on the token in his hand, he was even more shocked. Lord of Shengxian Horizon, you don't need to be suspicious. It won't be long before your spies know my origin. But, not now. Ling Qinglan smiled slightly. During the Tianjiao battle, I hope Lord of Shengxian Horizon will be merciful and don't disclose our information. Xie Wei was silent and thought about the intention. Before he sorted out his thoughts, he saw that Ling Qinglan's face and Numa suddenly changed into a completely strange person, as if everything just now was an illusion. This time, Xie Wei was completely shocked. He didn't even know that the token in his hand fell to the ground. With his cultivation, it was impossible for him to have an illusion. The only possibility was that he couldn't see through the secret skill of camouflage. Thinking of this, he had another extremely frightening guess in his heart. He couldn't help but look at the people behind Ling Qinglan again. These people. At this moment, he finally sensed that a storm was coming. Something big might happen in this Tianjiao battle. Shopkeeper, have you finished making the houseplate? Ling Qinglan, who had changed his face, asked Xie Wei to come back to reality. It was a blatant warning. He warned him not to disclose any information about the bloody accident of Holy Spirit to Tianya in before the end of the Tianjiao battle. He took a deep breath and erased the half-finished houseplate. He took out an exquisite jade key from the drawer, and his expression returned to normal. He smiled and said, "It just so happens that an upper-rank sect had an accident today, so they couldn't stay in the garden. You're really lucky to have Qiu Court Garden." Facing Xie Wei's sudden kindness, Ling Qinglan was stunned. Then he took the jade key and smiled, "You deserve to be the Lord of Shengxian Horizon. You are so courageous. If we were in another situation, maybe I would like to be friends with you. Then, I really want to climb up the social ladder." Xie Wei chuckled. As the saying goes, harmony brings wealth. I, Tianyik Attic, am just a businessman. I'm willing to help you with this. Chapter 564. Book Maze Lu, in 1 second, wonderful pop-up window free reading. After sending out the token of Choting Garden, Xie Wei personally led the way. After arranging the accommodation of Ling Qinglan and others, he hurriedly told the manager of the inn, returned to the study, and wrote a letter. After a while, Xie Wei put down the writing brush and looked at the words on the table. After a moment of silence, he seemed to have finally made a choice. His face relaxed and he put it in the drawer. Lord Tianxing did have a sign. The situation of this Tianjiao battle is gloomy and obscure. It seems to be mediocre, but it also seems to be turbulent with endless variables. It seems that a storm is coming. Xie Wei straightened up, turned his head, and looked at the sky with his hands behind his back. Looking at the fairy peak over the city, there was a deep feeling in his eyes. Even if you are the fate ancestor, you can't be satisfied every time. It was like that 1,000 years ago, and 1,000 years later, it is still the same. After Ling Qinglan and others moved into Choting Garden, they asked a group of young disciples to return to their rooms. Then they took off their disguises and revealed their true faces. In addition to Ling Qinglan, there were Yang Zai, Dongfang Wuxue, LVU, and Li Hai, the deputy lord of Yushu sect who led the team on the surface. As for Hua Yang and Yi Shui, they stayed in the sect to coordinate the overall situation. If ghosts like when Yuan Qing appeared in the Immortal Ascension City, it would cause panic. The secret method that Master taught us is really amazing. Xie Wei's cultivation is no less than that of nature's test, but he couldn't find any flaws. LVU's tone was a little excited. As a casual practitioner of Ghost Circle, he had the opportunity to come to the supreme Immortal Ascension City in Qingshui Circle. If it was 10 years ago, he couldn't even think about it. When Ling Qinglan heard the word master, he frowned slightly. In his mind, only one person was worthy of this title. However, Su Jojo had done him a favor after all. Even if Su Jojo imitated that person everywhere and he was uncomfortable, he would not say anything on the surface. The Tianjiao battle will begin in 2 days. Let's have a rest. Li Hai said. Yang Zai nodded and smiled. Well, Ling Qinglan, you stay here. I will go out for a walk and see if there is any news of Master. Speaking of which, although we are nearly 2,000 years old, it is the first time for us to come to the Immortal Ascension City. Yes. Ling Qinglan responded. After thinking for a while, he reminded, pay attention to Void Sword Sect. After all, a complicated look flashed through Yang Zai's eyes, but in the blink of an eye, he recovered his open-mindedness and said with a faint smile, don't worry. With Master's secret method, even if we encounter the Void Sword Sect head-on, it doesn't matter. After saying this, he turned around and walked out of the gate, following the path he came from. This scene happened to be witnessed by Su Li, who just came out of the spring courtyard.
Zai.
Su Li was slightly stunned. She turned back and quietly scanned the neighboring garden with her divine awareness. She immediately saw Ling Qinglan and others who had not completely dispersed. They're actually next door? It was too coincidental. Moreover, even if Ling Qinglan warned the Tianya Inn as she said, it was impossible for the Tianya Inn to have one more yard at this time. The only possibility was, you occupied the Splendor Hall's courtyard? Su Li quickly figured out the cause and effect. She couldn't help but show a strange expression. She smiled and quietly followed Yang Zai. Yang Zai naturally didn't know all this. After walking out of the inn, he quickly came to the bustling street. He looked around and walked to the busiest city center. There are only 2 days left before the Tianjiao contest. Master should have arrived long ago, but I don't know which inn he lives in. Yang Zai thought in his heart and walked quickly. After a while, he came to the large square in the center of the city. The square had existed for a very long time, and the ancient traces left by time could be seen everywhere. The black ground was made of unknown stone. Even if it had been baptized by wind and rain, it still didn't have much damage. At this moment, the square was naturally overcrowded. The practitioners were of extremely high quality. They were all dragons and phoenixes among men. Among the 10 people, at least 3 were disciples of holy sects with noble backgrounds, and the rest were at least from middle-grade sects. Of course, most of them were casual practitioners and practitioners of low-grade sects who came to watch the fun. After all, according to the base number of practitioners in Qingshui Circle, the Tianjiao contest was a minority. A gathering of geniuses. What a grand scene. I don't know what my ranking in the Tianjiao contest can be with my current cultivation. Yang Zai sighed in his heart and approached the center of the square. Suddenly, he saw a huge black stone tablet standing in the center of the square, on which many names were flashing. This is... Yang Zai was stunned and walked quickly to the stone tablet. He immediately saw the flashing names, among which the top 10 names were particularly conspicuous. Ling Li, Chu Qingning, Yin Xuetong, Fang Mu, Zhu Linfeng, Luo Hong, Ling Xian, Zhao Qianyuan, Xian Yue, Fang Lan. Su Li was also in the crowd at this moment, looking at the stone tablet with flickering eyes. Is this the Qianyek Attic Star Tablet? I heard that before the Tianjiao contest, the predicted names of the top 10 talents will be revealed. Why are there so many unfamiliar faces this time? Tut tut, the disaster 1,000 years ago is well known. Many talents left and disappeared. It's good to see a few familiar faces. That's true. Many practitioners in the crowd whispered. Yang Zai looked at the name Zhu Linfeng, which ranked 5th, and was absent-minded. Junior fellow apprentice. He didn't care about other people in Void Sword Sect, but Zhu Linfeng, hurry up. At this moment, there was a commotion among the practitioners. Someone shouted, go and watch the fun. Zhu Linfeng and Luo Hong of Void Sword Sect are on the gambling platform. What? Hurry up. Let's go. If we are late, there will be no fun to watch. Many practitioners immediately rushed to the gambling platform. Yang Zai's face changed slightly, and he flashed away. It seems that Zai has feelings for Void Sword Sect. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly, and she followed him. Soon, the gambling platform was surrounded by practitioners. Yang Zai squeezed to the front without a trace. Sure enough, he saw a familiar face standing on the side of the gambling platform that he hadn't seen for many years. However, the junior fellow apprentice who only knew how to smirk now had a cold face and anger in his eyes. Zhu Linfeng, you are a coward. How can you rank ahead of me? Is Qianyek Attic blind? On the other side of the gambling platform, Luo Hong, holding a long spear, sneered, "What? Don't you continue to be a coward?" Zhu Linfeng snorted, "You can insult me. But you can't insult senior fellow apprentice Yang. Ha 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 ha, that traitor Yang Zai, you still call him senior fellow apprentice?" Luo Hong suddenly laughed and said in a sarcastic tone, "If Ling Mo hadn't run fast, I would have killed him. It's really bad luck for the Void Sword sect to meet a traitor like you." Speaking of this, Luo Hong shook the long spear in his hand, and the blood-red brilliant sword, "I will teach you a lesson on behalf of the elders of your sect." Luo Hong shouted in a low voice, and then suddenly rushed out with his long spear. His speed was so fast that all the practitioners under the platform exclaimed. As a member of Shura Holy Sect, he was extremely good at close combat. The gambling platform was very narrow, which was just what he wanted. Zhu Linfeng's eyes slightly condensed, and the spiritual power surged between his fingers and palms. It condensed into a black flying sword, surrounded by grey airflow. A wisp of extremely dangerous pneuma leaked out. Void Sword Technique. Someone in the crowd recognized it and was shocked. Only Yang Zai mastered the holy method of Void Sword Sect, and Zhu Linfeng really learned it. No wonder he stood out among the inherited disciples and became the successor of Yang Zai. Seeing this, Yang Zai was gratified, and his mind flashed back to the scene under the waterfall of the mountain, when his junior brother practiced Void Sword Technique hard under his guidance. The silly boy who always said he was stupid and couldn't learn can now be independent. Yang Zai felt infinite emotion in his heart, and the two people on the gambling platform had collided with each other. Clang! The spear and the sword collided, and sparks flew everywhere, which was extremely dazzling. A huge force poured into his body, and Zhu Linfeng took a step back with his sword, but Luo Hong took 2 steps back. He stood firm, and his face was slightly pale. Without saying a word, the long spear in his hand turned into a long dragon, and a fierce attack surged out from his hand, like a monstrous wave. Boom! 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 Zhu Linfeng's face was solemn, and he didn't retreat. Instead, he moved forward and resisted all of Luo Hong's attacks with his hands. There was a loud bang. Shura Holy Sect's 13 waves of blood, and Luo Hong made 4 waves in a flash. It's really horrible. If it were me, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to resist one spear. Zhu Linfeng is not simple, either. He actually blocked all of them. Didn't you see that he didn't even take a step back? I think Zhu Linfeng is more powerful. The practitioners under the platform were talking about it. They didn't expect to see such a wonderful fight before the Tianjiao contest, and they all exclaimed. And the battle between the two people on the platform had also entered the climax. Buzz. The moment the two separated, Luo Hong suddenly restrained his murderous intent, and his figure quickly faded away. This scene suddenly made the audience fall into a dead silence, and then, there was an uproar. Oh my God, the secret method of the way of killing. Someone has learned the secret method of the way of killing. The Shura Holy Sect has a successor. I didn't expect that after the bloody accident of Holy Spirit, the Holy Sects didn't fall short of successors, and the new generation of Tianjiao shone brilliantly. Yang Zai was nervous, and worry flashed through his eyes. Su Li saw this scene in the crowd. Isn't this the move that Ling Mo used in the bloody world? Is he from the Shura Holy Sect? She didn't deliberately investigate the origin of these old friends. She would meet them when she dealt with the holy sects in the future, so there was no need to waste effort. She knew some details about the Shura Holy Sect. It was originally a killer force. Ling Mo's cold and aloof character was really a killer material. No wonder he became the head of killers in the reincarnation mirror. When Su Li was lost in thought, there was another change on the platform. Hum. Zhu Linfeng snorted coldly. He grasped the black flying sword in his hand and swept out an arc-shaped shockwave. Void Sword Technique, Void Shock. Buzz. A shock force rushed to all directions in the blink of an eye, and then a figure appeared in the left rear. Before he could stand firm, the black flying sword swept over and stopped at his neck. You lost. Zhu Linfeng said coldly. Luo Hong's movement was stagnant, and his face instantly became gloomy. You just practiced the first hurdle of the way of killing. Who gave you the courage to slander my senior fellow apprentice? Zhu Linfeng exerted force in his hand, and blood suddenly appeared on Luo Hong's neck. The dark red blood beads dripped along the flying sword. Apologize. At this moment, Zhu Linfeng's words were full of anger, and the suppressed anger in his eyes finally burst out. Chapter 565. Apologize. Not a chance. Luo Hong sneered and suddenly burst into a cloud of black fog. His ethereal voice came from all directions. A traitor is a traitor. Do you think you can defeat me easily if I don't want to use more powerful means? Zhu Linfeng tightened his grip on the flying sword, but found that Luo Hong had already flown away from the gambling platform. His voice full of killing intent came, "Our Shura holy sect is not good at frontal combat. I will let you live for 2 more days, and I will kill you in the Tianjiao Lis." Zhu Linfeng's eyes were slightly gloomy, but there was no fear in his eyes. "Holy Sun Zhu, you won exclusively." The steward of the gambling platform held a universe ring. Zhu Linfeng put it away and took a deep look at the direction where Luo Hong left. Then he calmly stepped down from the platform. Luo Hong didn't use his trump card, and he didn't use any of his trump cards either. It was still unknown who would be the winner at that time. Yang Zai, who was hidden in the crowd, had a gleam in his eyes. The little junior fellow apprentice has really grown up, but he still protects me like this. I am afraid that in the sect, thinking of this, Yang Zai frowned and followed him without a trace. Seeing this, Su Li didn't continue to follow him. Although she hated the holy sects, she didn't hate all the disciples of the holy sects. For example, Zhu Linfeng still protected Yang Zai, which was rare and commendable. If there was a chance in the future, she could bring him to the Ni sect and train him well. After the reincarnation mirror, she naturally understood the importance of power. If she wanted to fight against so many holy sects in Qingshui Circle, she couldn't rely on herself. After a while, Su Li left the square and went straight to the buildings at the foot of the Immortals Mountain along the streets of the ancient city. The Immortals Mountain was very large, but not all areas were inhabited. There was an inexplicable pressure in some areas, which squeezed all the nimbus in the nothingness. No one was willing to come here. Following the faint guidance in her heart, Su Li came to one of the places of pressure, a dilapidated thatched cottage. Along the path overgrown with weeds, Su Li slowly stepped into the cottage, raising a thick layer of dust on the ground, which was constantly churning in the beams of light that were cast into the cottage. Whoosh! Su Li suddenly stopped. She looked down and saw that a slate on the ground was broken into powder and blown away with the wind, revealing the original black soil. The soil was a little red. At a glance, it looked like flesh and blood. It was as if the world had suddenly quietened down. It was so quiet that not a single sound could be heard. Even though the hut was warm in color, it made the feeling of terror even more intense. This is just an ordinary grass hut. I'm afraid it has been decaying for tens of thousands of years, but it still hasn't collapsed. Su Li looked around, and there was a sense of caution in her eyes. There was a strange pneuma everywhere here. Don't be careless. Black Lotus flashed out of the ring. His eyes were vigilant, and his tone was serious. He was no longer as carefree as before. I don't know why the ghost race's bewitching ghost city is here. However, back then, it was a secret realm of the ghost race. Even I don't know all the secrets of this place. For example, I don't have any impression of this place. There was no such place in the previous ghost city. Su Li answered softly, but did not mention the feeling of calling in her heart. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the grass hut was still quiet and there was nothing unusual. Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly and stepped out again. This time, she passed the courtyard full of weeds and entered the cottage. The light suddenly dimmed, and there was a sense of dampness on her face. But Su Li didn't feel comfortable. My clan was exterminated. Even the sacred city was moved, but I didn't notice it at all. Then why do I guard the Holy Lotus seat? Obviously, he didn't expect that the world would change so much when he woke up. He was so confused that he even forgot to maintain his calm on the surface. Su Li didn't disturb the old man's meditation. She leaned against the crumbling door, took out a bottle of spiritual wine from the universe ring, and drank it slowly. There were still 2 days before the Tianjiao battle, so there was no hurry. Although the old man in black was old, he thought fast. After only an hour, he calmed down and sighed, "Little girl, do you have any wine?" As soon as he finished speaking, Su Li took out a bottle of wine from the universe ring and threw it out. "It's not good wine. Senior, please don't dislike it." The old man in black took a big gulp of wine and smiled. "Little girl, you are very interesting. I wanted to kill you, but now the world has changed greatly, and it is meaningless to kill people. How much do you know about the Tianjiao battle?" Su Li turned her head and glanced at the old man in black, and sighed, "My kindness is unrequited. I saw that no one was accompanying you, so I stayed. I didn't expect that you not only wanted to kill me, but also wanted to continue to gain something for nothing." The old man in black laughed when he heard this. "Well, I will give you the reward for solving the puzzle just now. I have no money, but fortunately, I have some small things to keep me alive." As he said, he waved his sleeves and threw out a light, which Su Li caught. After the light dissipated, there was a shabby book lying in her palm. "Notes in the Thatched Cottage?" Su Li read the words on the cover of the book, and the old man in black was surprised. "You can read the characters of the Ghost Clan?" Su Li didn't answer. She opened the book and glanced at it. She was immediately attracted by the profound practice method in it, and she was secretly shocked. It was worthy of being taken out by the old guy of the All Spirits calendar. This book looked inconspicuous, but it recorded the true explanation of the sword intent. Although she had understood the sword intent, she couldn't make progress for a long time, so she couldn't use the destruction sword intent and became useless. But with this note, it was no longer difficult to practice the sword intent. Su Li smiled. In this way, even if she only got this essay in the Immortal Ascension City, she would make a profit. Since you can read the characters, it will save a lot of trouble. The old man in black said lightly, but he felt a little pity in his heart. He could use the characters of the Ghost Clan as a bargaining chip, but he didn't expect that he miscalculated. "I am very satisfied with your gift, Senior." Su Li put away the essay, and her tone became a little cheerful. "As for the Tianjiao battle, it has something to do with the holy sects. I also heard it from an elder of a top-grade sect on my way here. The Immortal Ascension Mountain is related to the fate of Qingshui Circle, and the list of the Tianjiao list is tied to the fate of the entire sect in Qingshui Circle. In short, if a young disciple in the sect can get a good ranking in the Tianjiao list, the sect can receive more blessings and gradually develop and grow stronger. And if you can occupy 1% of the fate of the entire Tianjiao list in the Tianjiao battle, you are qualified to be a holy sect. And if you occupy more than half of the fate of the Tianjiao list, you can be the peak holy sect." Holy sect. The old man in black frowned. "What's the use of being a holy sect?" Su Li squinted her eyes and said gently, "Only by being a holy sect can the practitioners in the sect break the bottleneck. Otherwise, they can only be trapped in nature's test and wait for death." The old man in black was shocked. Restriction of the natural law. Chapter 566. Senior, what did you think of? Su Li said quietly, interrupting the old man's thoughts. The old man in black frowned and snorted coldly, fighting for fate with the Tianjiao list. "According to what you said, it should be the Wangtian tablet of the Buddha Yuan ancient temple, the sacred place of human clans Buddhism. It is said that it contains all kinds of methods, including many secret skills." Su Li pretended to be surprised. "The Wangtian tablet?" "Yes." The old man in black seemed to be lost in memory, but at that time, the human clan who could leave their names on the Wangtian tablet didn't get fate, but Buddha's relics, which could help people improve their cultivation after refining. Changing the world. Letting the Wangtian tablet carry the fate of a world is absolutely against the law of nature. What happened during the years when I was asleep? The old man in black faintly smelled a conspiracy, but helplessness flashed in his eyes when his eyes fell on the black lotus under the guanyin. "Senior, haven't you ever thought of leaving here to find out the truth?" Su Li's words sounded timely, almost touching the old man's heart. If it was in the past, I might be able to do my part for this world, but now, I can't. Why? Su Li put the flagon aside and looked at the Guanyin statue meaningfully. Is it because this thing suppressed you, senior? You can tell me the reason. Maybe I can help you. Why are you so obsessed with my freedom? The old man in black was surprised. He couldn't help but look at Su Li again vaguely, but the conclusion he got was the same as before. This girl was an ordinary young female practitioner of human clan. She was even too young. Her bone age was less than 50 years, and she was in Yuanying realm. Even in his time, such a little girl was a genius. But when it came to helping, it was a fantasy. Su Li didn't answer. She just stared at the old man in black, and there was only clarity and sincerity in her eyes. The old man in black seemed to think of something. His expression suddenly softened, and the killing intent in his heart dissipated. Well, I don't mind telling you. He smiled, and the wrinkles on his face were like tree bark. Do you know the existence of the ghost clan? I have seen it in the classics of the sect. Su Li nodded seriously. That's an extinct race. I heard that it was extremely powerful. Black Lotus, who was in the ring, rolled his eyes. His cunning little master was talking nonsense again to deceive people. No, to deceive ghosts. Black Coat, Ghost Clan, could it be? Black Lotus pinched his chin thoughtfully, but he didn't remind Su Li. This old man is a member of the ghost race. The black-robed old man went straight to the point and said calmly, back then, I made a grave mistake and was punished to swear an oath to guard the Holy Lotus for all eternity until a true successor of the Holy Lotus appeared in my clan. At this point, although the black-clothed old man's mood was still calm, his tone unconsciously carried a trace of bitterness. However, even the patriarch would not have thought that with the passage of time, even the ghost clan no longer exists, who would be able to break the oath? Saint Lotus. Su Li's sight fell on the statue of Guanyin and she said, is this the Black Lotus? Why don't you let me try? Hihi, the black-robed old man laughed. Even if this old man agrees to let you try the sacred relic of my ghost race, a mere human like you will not be able to withstand it. I repeatedly woke up and fell asleep, but in the end, I couldn't wait for that clansman. My thoughts have already faded, so there's no need to force it. Su Li curled her lips. Elder, don't underestimate me just because I'm young. I'm a heaven's chosen one of the human race. Maybe I'm the one you're waiting for? Ha ha ha. The black-robed old man laughed out loud. Little human girl, you are indeed too young. Do you really think that you can do whatever you want just because you have a bit of talent? Seeing that Su Li was still not convinced, the elder in black shook his head and slowly stepped aside. Well, it is fate that we meet. I'll wake you up and make you understand that there's always someone better out there. Humph. Old senior, I'll prove it to you. Su Li immediately stood up and jumped to the front of the Guanyin statue. She asked confidently, Elder, what should I do? In the eyes of the black-clothed old man, her current appearance made it seem as if she didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Holding the mentality of watching a joke, he replied, place your hand on the lotus platform and calmly sense it. Finally, it came to this step. Su Li looked slightly serious. She stretched out her hand and gently covered the black lotus throne. 1 breath, 2 breaths. The Guanyin statue did not respond. Although the black-robed old man did not hold any hope, he couldn't help but sigh slightly when he saw this scene. With a comforting tone, he said gently, this is the 12th grade Holy Lotus. The Holy Lotus has a spirit. Even the most talented patriarch of the Ghost Clan could not subdue it. You are not even a member of the Ghost Clan. How could you, Before the black-robed old man finished his words, his old eyes suddenly widened. He was completely shocked by the scene in front of him. The black lotus throne shook faintly, and immediately came to life as if it had found a home. It quickly became smaller and integrated into Su Li's pubic region. The obviously noble pneuma revealed urgency and uneasiness, as if Su Li was afraid of abandoning it. It was as humble as dust. Boom! Without the black lotus throne, the Guanyin statue could not support it and collapsed, blasting a huge pit on the decayed floor. The black-robed old man seemed not to hear it. He stared blankly at Su Li, who had sat cross-legged on the ground. His lips trembled and his face was full of horror. The Holy Lotus chose the human clan? Su Li's divine awareness sank into her pubic region and immediately saw the pocket-sized black lotus of the 12th grade that was circling around her black lotus throne of the 18th grade. She impatiently wanted to integrate into it, but couldn't. Su Li looked at the 12th grade black lotus unhurriedly. At the moment when she touched it, she sensed that there was a ghost clan's forbidden oath in her awareness sea. The black-robed old man could not hurt her, but also became her slave. Although the restriction is a little big, it is definitely a good card in this ghost town. Thinking of this, Su Li's eyes left the forbidden oath and returned to her pubic region. Her eyes were cold. Black Lotus, do you still want to continue pretending to be dead? Ah. I am afraid that the old guy will find out and affect your plan. Black Lotus's embarrassed voice came into her mind. Congratulations, Master. You got the most precious treasure of the Ghost Clan, the 12th grade Black Lotus transforming into sword. Transforming into sword. Su Li thought and looked at the pocket-sized lotus throne flying in her pubic region. It turns out that this is the transforming into sword. She had a good memory. Naturally, she remembered that as early as when she broke through Zhuji realm, Black Lotus told her that the transforming into sword could transform into 18 Black Lotus swords. If she could control them, her power would be infinite. There are some loopholes in what I said before. Black Lotus's tone was a little cautious. Throughout the history of this circle, there has never been an 18th grade transforming into sword. Even the 12th grade transforming into sword is a legend. I thought it disappeared in time. I didn't expect that you are so lucky to meet it. Su Li looked as usual, without any surprise of getting the treasure. She just stared at the Black Lotus shadow. What else are you hiding from me? Tell me all of them. Black Lotus suddenly sweated on his forehead. He rubbed his hands awkwardly and said honestly, this old man in black is similar to the dragon shadow in the ancestral land of the ghost region. They are also old monsters in the years of all spirits calendar. But I have some impression of him. His reputation in the history books of the Ghost Clan is quite big. If I remember correctly, he should be the only genius of the branch of the prehistoric Ghost Clan, named Yi Che. There are not many of them, but they are famous for making Yi Ji. In the years of the All Spirits calendar, Yi Ji was a famous delicacy of the Ghost Clan. Yi Ji? Delicacy? Su Li thought of the ugly blue monster she saw that year, and couldn't help but feel strange. Did the taste of the prehistoric Ghost Clan all have such a strange taste? Don't think too much. At that time, Yi Ji was as cute as a domestic pig in the secular world. Later, I don't know what happened, and Yi Ji became like that. Anyway, I haven't eaten it. It's awful. You haven't eaten it, but you know it's awful? Su Li raised her eyebrows and didn't expose him. At this moment, she finally confirmed the long-time guess in her heart. Black Lotus was not a very smart spirit, and she didn't know how he survived to the present. How should I integrate the transforming sword skill? Su Li asked, suppressing the thought in her heart. Open up your mind and allow it to merge with your foundation. However, nurturing these 12 swords is not something that can be done in a short period of time. You need an ocean's worth of ghostly chi to support it. Speaking of business, Black Lotus was reliable. After explaining in detail, Su Li let go of the control of her pubic region. The pocket-sized lotus throne quickly integrated into the base like a swallow returning to its nest, without any hindrance, as if the two were originally one. When the transforming sword skill was completely integrated into the base, Su Li immediately felt that there were 12 more subtle pneumas in the base, with a sense of coldness and sharpness. And the extra 6th grade pneumas were still in a state of silence. If I find another 6th grade transforming sword skill, can I integrate it into it? This thought flashed in Su Li's mind, and then she put it away. The Ghost Clan had long been extinct, and there was little news about it in Qingshui Circle. It was impossible to find the transforming sword skill in a short time, so she had to pay attention to it later. The integration of the transforming sword skill seemed to be fast, but in fact, it took Su Li a day and a half. It's time to go back to Tianya Inn to meet. Su Li opened her eyes, and a very faint black light flashed in her eyes. The black-robed elder, who was meditating aside, sensed the movement and immediately got up to bow. "Master, I'm Yi Che." Su Li accepted the bow calmly and immediately said, "Senior Yi, I accept this bow, and you don't have to bow to me anymore. You don't have to worry that I will ask you to do something with a forbidden oath." Hearing this, the biggest stone in Yi Che's heart was suddenly dropped, but he looked sad and lonely. He was a genius in the past, but he never thought that he would fall into such a situation and become a slave of a little girl of the human clan. Su Li was very sensitive, and she saw through Yi Che's mentality. She immediately chuckled, "Senior Yi, don't worry about it. Those who were in the same generation as you have already become the ashes of time. You'd better get over it. Relatively speaking, you do get freedom, but I still need to remind you. I don't know how many years have passed since the All Spirits calendar, but the time span is at least more than 40,000 years. You have lived for too long. It's okay if you are in the Shengxian mountain, but if you leave, the natural law will inevitably send nature's punishment." Su Li's words and manners were extremely rigorous, and she seemed to be a different person from before. Hearing this, Yi Che's face changed slightly, and he finally realized that Chapter 567. Was I fooled? I was fooled by this little girl who was less than 50 years old. Her behavior just now was definitely to lower my vigilance so that she could easily get the Holy Lotus. He was fooled and didn't even know it. The human clan took the Holy Lotus of the Ghost clan. I'm sorry for the ancestors of the Ghost clan. Yi Che covered his chest and felt suffocated. But because of the oath, he didn't dare to say anything disrespectful. He didn't even dare to ask Su Li to solve his doubts. In the world, there was no reason for a master to solve the doubts of a servant, even if he was suffocated by so many doubts. Su Li completely ignored the struggle on his old face and said with a smile, "It's almost time for the Tianjiao battle. Do you want to stay here or go with me to have a look?" Yi Che glanced at Su Li bitterly and then sighed, "Of course I will go with you, master." After staying in this shabby cottage for tens of thousands of years, how could he not get tired of it? Even if he had countless complicated thoughts about Su Li, he instantly suppressed all the thoughts and nodded because of the temptation of going out to have a look. Su Li answered softly and turned to walk out of the dilapidated courtyard. Every time she took a step, the weeds that were as high as a person were annihilated by an inch, revealing piles of white bones that were as high as half of her knees. Some of the bones even glowed with colorful jade luster. Su Li raised her eyebrows and glanced at the white bones. Her expression didn't change anymore and she walked out slowly. "Senior Yi, why don't you follow me?" Yi Che, who had been observing Su Li in the cottage, nodded when he saw this. He flicked his sleeves, and all the bones and the cottage turned into flying ashes. Since he and the Holy Lotus had left, there was no need for the cottage to exist. The Ghost clan was destroyed, so he couldn't cling to the rotten past anymore. He wanted to see if this little master was worth his life. Today was the day of the Tianjiao battle. The plaza in the center of the city was bustling with noise and excitement. The area around the Heavenly Star Monument was completely different from the previous 2 days. There were rows of tall stone puppets made of unknown materials surrounding the Heavenly Star Monument, sealing off the space within 100 meters around it. Moreover, there was a faint feeling of spatial distortion. The Heavenly Star Valley's small world dimension technique allows one to enclose a piece of land and form a world of their own. There's also the Heavenly Star Stele. When Su Li and Yi Che arrived and saw the scene, Yi Che's calm face suddenly showed surprise. "The Tianqing Valley has actually survived until now?" Su Li's eyes flickered thoughtfully. The Heavenly Star Valley that Yi Che spoke of should be the Horizon Guest. Black Lotus had also said that it had an extremely long history. Looking at Yi Che's reaction, its origins were probably even more terrifying than he had imagined. "Master, even during this old servant's era, the Heavenly Star Valley was an ancient faction that could be traced back to countless years ago. I did not expect that the Heavenly Star Valley would still exist even after my ghost race perish." Yi Che had no intention of hiding anything. He grew slightly excited. This force definitely knows the reason behind the destruction of the ghost race. Su Li knew what he was thinking. She pondered for a moment and said, "You can investigate it. Also, check the list of glory sects that participated in the bloody calamity of the Holy Spirit and see if there's any difference from the one I got." "Master, what is the bloody calamity of the Holy Spirit?" Seeing that Su Li did not stop him, Yi Che was relieved and then asked in a low voice embarrassedly. He had just walked out of the thatched cottage, so he naturally did not know the major events that happened in his sleep. "Just ask anyone. Everyone knows about it," Su Li said casually. She turned her eyes and saw Hua Shi-chun, who was waiting anxiously in front of the puppet. Hua Shi-chun was anxiously waiting in front of the puppet. The others were nowhere to be seen. Her eyes flashed. "I'll go in first. You can move freely outside. Remember my instructions." "I understand. Master, be careful in everything. The sky-gazing tablet is a sacred object of Buddhism. It does not cause killing. But I don't know about this sky-gazing tablet." When Yi Che spoke up to hear, he added, "If Master's strength is sufficient, you can choose the left path. I heard that among the human geniuses that went to the heaven-gazing monument all those years ago, there was a saying, 'The left path is the greatest fortuitous encounter.'" Su Li nodded in surprise. "You know a lot. You are much more reliable than that old thing." "Old thing?" Yi Che looked blank. The old thing in the black lotus ring instantly darkened his face. "Okay, I'm leaving." Su Li waved her hand and squeezed into the crowd. Wherever she went, all the practitioners who were watching the fun were pushed away unconsciously. "It seems that my little master's cultivation is much higher than what I saw." Yi Che took a deep look at Su Li's back and disappeared in the crowd. "Elder Hua." Hua Shi-chun was still anxious. Suddenly he heard a familiar tone behind him. He immediately turned his head and said with surprise and joy, You are finally here. Junior Lord and others have already entered. This is the news I have collected in the past 2 days. The opening time of the entrance of the Tianjiao list is not fixed, and it only lasts for 2 hours. You should also go in and wait." Su Li took the jade slip handed over by him, nodded, and walked to the stone puppet. The stone puppet's eyes suddenly lit up with red light. After glancing at Su Li for a moment, it silently stepped aside. Su Li walked in without looking back, but she was thinking this stone puppet had the function of identifying bone age. It seemed good to put one in Ni sect. She didn't know whether Chanyik Attic would sell it or not. Seeing Su Li's figure disappear in the entrance, Hua Shi-chun breathed a sigh of relief, and immediately showed an excited smile on his face. With Lord Qingshui's help, Jiguang's sect would definitely be promoted to a holy sect. The sense of distortion lasted for a few seconds and then dissipated. What Su Li saw was a square that was countless times larger than before. Even though nearly 80% of the talents of Qingshui's circle came at this moment, they only occupied 1/5 of the square, and they were sparsely distributed. The square is so large, and it is by no means a waste. The cultivation in the All Spirits calendar year was much more prosperous than it is now. This thought flashed in Su Li's mind. She turned and walked in the direction of the people of Jiguang's sect, but found that the people of Ni sect and Jiguang's sect stood together, and the opposite were many disciples of Splendor Hall. "Which sect do you belong to? How dare you meddle in the business of Splendor Hall? Are you tired of living?" In the team of Splendor Hall, someone scolded with a cold face, "Get out of here." Yang Zai grinned, revealing his white teeth. "You repulsive people want to know the name of my sect. If it weren't for the prohibition of fighting in this space, believe it or not, I could press all of you to the ground by myself." You what?" Yang Zai picked his ears and looked like a rascal. "At first glance, I know that you are a group of useless people who have never seen the world. You don't even know how to quarrel. It seems that you are not good at fighting." The eyes of the people of Splendor Hall were red, and their chests rose and fell violently. Swish, swish, swish. A few grumpy disciples of Splendor Hall finally couldn't help it. They made a gesture, and several flying swords were unsheathed. Then they saw the sky. A huge suction came from the ground. The disciples who fought screamed, and their hands burst into blood mist. They were sucked into the whirlpool and disappeared. There was silence in the square. The disciples of Splendor Hall were all stiff when they saw several flying swords falling on the ground. A group of idiots. Yang Zai laughed, and his tone was full of sarcasm. I warned you not to fight, but you still dared to fight. Are you brainless? Fortunately, I showed up and sent them out. Otherwise, they wouldn't even know how they died. Shouldn't you thank me? Let's go. The young leader's face was as gloomy as water, and blue veins appeared on his forehead. Hearing this, the flying sword in his hand was almost crushed. He turned around and left. He was afraid that if he continued to listen, he would not be able to help but fight. This person's words were too unpleasant. Ha 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 ha. Why are you leaving? Don't go. I was worried that there was no one to talk to. Yang Zai waved his hand hard, looking mean. The disciples of Jiguang's sect were stunned. They were few in number, and they thought they would be humiliated by the people of Splendor Hall. They didn't expect that when this ordinary-looking strange young man showed up, all the people of Splendor Hall couldn't resist. This mouth was too powerful. Nice. Yang Zai laughed out loud when he saw the people from the Splendor Hall walking even faster. They were much easier to scold than the people from the Void Sword sect. His mouth could only be ranked second in the Void Sword sect. There was one person he could not scold no matter what. Ling Qinglan's eyes twitched, and he turned his head away. The disciples of Void Sword sect were really good at talking. He thought that Yang Zai was reticent and not good at it, but he didn't expect that it was not that he was not good at it, but that no one scolded him. Thinking about it, he had no enemies in Ni sect. Who could he scold? This time, he met Splendor Hall, so he liberated his nature. Thank you for helping me out, elder brothers. Xian was shocked by Yang Zai's laughter. He quickly cupped his hands and stepped forward to get close to Yang Zai. He looked at Yang Zai with admiration. Elder brother, you are so good at talking. Can you teach me? Yang Zai was about to answer, but he suddenly saw Su Li behind Xian, looking at him with a faint smile. Senior Qing Shui. Yang Zai suddenly broke into a cold sweat, and quickly bowed his head to salute. He didn't forget Su Li's order, and changed master to Senior Qing Shui. Elder sister? Xian immediately turned around and saw the familiar thin figure. He immediately ran over with joy and hugged Su Li's waist. How old are you? You are still like a child. Su Li helplessly pushed Xian away. Seeing Jiang run and others coming over, she nodded gently. Elder sister, are these people yours? Xian couldn't help but transmit the sound in private. Among all the people, only he knew that the elder sister in front of him was not called Qing Shui, but Su Jouzhou. Su Li smiled slightly. Does it matter whether they are mine or not? Just like my name, you only need to know that everything I do is beneficial to all of you. Xian thought for a moment, and showed a big smile. Elder sister, you are right. Master, we have warned Chanyik Attic, and Xie Wei doesn't dare to act rashly for the time being. Yang Zai transmitted the sound in secret, and Su Li nodded gently. I didn't expect that you have such a glib tongue. Yang Zai immediately smiled. In front of Su Li, he didn't dare to flirt. Chapter 568. The entrance of the prodigy battle was still turning slowly, but there was no response. Qing Shui. Senior sister, we have inquired about it these days. Jiang Run remembered Su Li's previous instructions and changed the way he addressed Su Li. He said with respect, the rules of every Tianjiao battle are almost the same. The first test is to test the nature of the soul to prevent alien races from sneaking in. Sister, I've also collected a lot of information. Xian glanced at Jiang Run and smiled. His tone implied a sense of comparison. I heard that in ancient times, the alien races were rampant, and the human clan was far less powerful than it is now. They could only survive in the gap between the alien races. In order to cultivate the talents of the human clan, we must first eliminate the spies of the alien races. Otherwise, it is very likely that we will work hard for others. Su Li nodded slightly, but a strange light flashed in her eyes. The situation within her body was very complicated. Even she wasn't sure if she could still be considered a human. She also didn't know if she could pass the first trial. However, since he had already entered, there was no reason for him to turn back. Jiang Run looked strangely at Xian An, who was contending for favor. He coughed lightly and continued, "The second test is cultivation. The bone age of the Tianjiao list is limited to 2,000 years old. The practitioners who come in, whether they are 100 years old, 1,000 years old, or 1,999 years old, are treated equally. The higher their cultivation, the higher their initial ranking." At this point, Jiang Run paused and said worriedly, "Senior sister, the ages of the 12 of us. I'm afraid we're a little too young. The oldest among us is only 1,200 years old. Compared to those holy sect disciples who are stuck at 2,000 years old, the gap is too big." Su Li didn't answer when she heard the words. She glanced at the people of Jiguang sect, who all lowered their heads in shame. "What? We haven't even started and you've already lost all confidence." Su Li frowned slightly and scolded him coldly. Xianan sighed and shook his head, "Sister, don't blame them. You don't know that the disciples of holy sects who come to participate in the Tianjiao battle this time are different from the past." Su Li raised her eyebrows and didn't speak. Then Xianan continued, "In the past, the disciples of the holy sects who reached the age limit of 2,000 years reached the early stage of Huishan realm, which was already very exaggerated. But this time, let alone early soul formation cultivators, even mid-soul formation cultivators and late soul formation cultivators are a dime a dozen. I even heard that the 4 people from the Pinnacle Holy Sect have broken through the soul formation stage and reached the tribulation passing stage. In an ordinary sage sect, he would already be an elder. Could it be that the rumors I heard are true?" Ying Qiao's small mouth slightly opened as she exclaimed in a low voice, "A few days ago, when I was at the tea house with my senior brothers, I heard someone say that the people who participated in the bloody catastrophe of the divine spirit all had some kind of restriction within their bodies, and their cultivation speed increased by leaps and bounds. They could be said to be monstrous. A tribulation stage cultivator who is less than 2,000 years old is too exaggerated." As soon as the words came out, Yang Zai and others immediately exchanged glances without a trace. Their cultivation was also very fast. It was really possible that it was the influence of reincarnation mirror, as Ying Qiao had heard in the rumors. Su Li narrowed her eyes and thought for a moment. But she didn't mention the bloody accident of the Holy Spirit. She just said, "Since we are here, let's take things as they come. Just do your best. Save your own life first. Do you understand? Especially you." Xianan, seeing Su Li's sight, Xianan shrank his neck and said, "Sister, don't worry. I won't take my life as a joke. I can abstain before entering each level. I will abstain after the second level. I just come in to see what my cultivation can rank. There are many people like me who come in to watch the fun." Su Li nodded slightly and turned to look at Jiang Run. "Go on." "Okay." Jiang Run's tone was calm and clear. He quickly shared what he had inquired with everyone. Not long after he finished speaking, the whirlpool behind the Heavenly Star tablet suddenly vibrated, and then it rotated rapidly. The secret realm of Tianjiao battle is opened. Almost in an instant, everyone stopped what they were doing and rushed into the whirlpool at once. No one knew when the whirlpool would close. If they missed the Tianjiao battle because of hesitation, they would regret it for a lifetime. "Let's go." What Jiang Run said just now can only be used as a reference. "Be careful. Let's go." Everyone rushed out without saying a word. Tens of thousands of genius practitioners of Qingshui Circle turned into a turbulent stream of people, rushing to be the first. The scene was spectacular and cruel. Even some people with low cultivation were unstable and fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, they were trampled into blood mist by countless people behind them. Su Li's expression didn't change, but a hint of awe flashed in her eyes. She immediately ordered, "Zai and Ling Qinglan, you two go in the front and leave a way for Xian An and others." Yang Zai knew the details of Xian An and others, so he took the lead without saying a word. A strange feeling flashed in Jiang Run's heart. Even if this group of people were old acquaintances of Lord Qingshui, they were too obedient. But at this moment, He had no time to think about it, and rushed into the whirlpool. After the darkness, all the hustle and bustle turned into extreme silence. Su Li opened her eyes and found that she was standing alone in front of a huge ancient tablet. She was surrounded by chaos, and she couldn't see the real situation. It seems that everyone is separated and tested separately. Su Li turned her eyes and cast them on the stone tablet. According to Black Lotus's knowledge, there was a complete scripture on the stone tablet. However, although the content of the scripture was on the ancient tablet in front of her, the name of the scripture and the opening general outline were erased, leaving a vague trace. Read this scripture and recite it. If you don't have the hindrance of the inner demons, you are a member of the human clan. Otherwise, you will be destroyed by the power and your soul will be scattered. Seeing the last paragraph of the scripture, Su Li narrowed her eyes, and immediately pressed her palm on the ancient tablet without hesitation. In just a moment, the golden light of the ancient tablet surged, and countless golden words jumped out of the ancient tablet and stood in the nothingness. Su Li's eyes glowed with golden light, and her red lips opened slightly. The scripture came out of her mouth unhurriedly, and every word was a gem. Every time she said a paragraph, there would be a line of golden scripture in the nothingness automatically into her body, washing from beginning to end, as if it was looking for something. At this moment, Su Li's mind instantly tightened. Although she still regarded herself as a member of the human clan, after all, she had the characteristics of the ghost clan. Would this scripture let her go? Seeing that she was about to touch the Black Lotus throne in her pubic region, Su Li was about to withdraw her palm. But at this moment, the two divine thunders, which had been calm, suddenly boiled, directly pulled the golden words over, and swallowed them. Buzz! The nothingness trembled, and the originally calm ancient tablet shook violently. Then, more scriptures spewed out. At the same time, the original words on the ancient tablet disappeared, and were replaced by another line of words. At the beginning of peace, all evils retreat. It is a blessing for our human clan. Old Monk's relic is willing to be the benefactor. At the end of the writing, Su Li had no time to read it carefully. Although the surging energy in the scripture was gentle, it was unreasonably huge. She had to concentrate on collecting it. After a long time, the golden light on the stone tablet dimmed, and the energy subsided. Su Li opened her eyes, and a bright Buddha's light flashed in her eyes. The energy was very gentle. Although she couldn't refine it immediately, it was easy to refine it. Buddha's relic, I only mentioned it from Black Lotus. It was the supreme cultivation secret treasure of the human clan in ancient times. I didn't expect it to help me. Su Li sighed in her heart. She saw that the line of words on the stone tablet had disappeared, and the original scripture was restored. Under the scripture, there was a blank line. Cultivation, Yuanying realm, ranking, 2476. Under this line of information, there was a blank groove. Hearing what Jiang Run said, Su Li naturally knew what to do. She took out a white and flawless blank jade slip. This jade slip was specially made by Tianyik Attic. It was distributed to all young geniuses who participated in the Tianjiao battle. By this, they could show their names on the Tianjiao list and divide their sects. It was also the key for all emerging talents to make a name for themselves. Su Li gently put the jade slip into the groove, and slightly raised her lips. A faint voice sounded, like a stone thrown on the calm lake, and ripples appeared. I am Su Jojo of Ni sect. Just when Su Li engraved her identity, in one of the countless stone tablet spaces, Ling Li looked at the scripture stone tablet in front of him with indifferent eyes. Ling Li, don't forget your innate mission. You are the keeper of the monument. You are destined to devote everything to the Ling family in your life. Even your life, you will not hesitate. And I, Ling Xian, am the only daughter of my father, the young lord of Shengtian Shrine, and the future fate ancestor. I am the mandate of heaven. You must listen to me. Otherwise, no one can protect my illegitimate nephew. Even if he hides in the Yin-Yang region, for my master, it is just a matter of a word to destroy a region. Do you know? Before the departure, the cold words of the veiled woman in Shengtian Palace still sounded in his ears. Ling Li took a deep breath, and the killing intent in his eyes faded. He took out a jade slip and put it into the groove. It seemed that he hadn't spoken for a long time, and his slightly hoarse voice echoed in the nothingness. Ling Li of the Fate Palace. As soon as he finished speaking, the jade slip in the groove flashed with white light, and instantly disappeared into the stone tablet. At the same time, Ling Xian, who was far away in the Fate Palace, saw a burst of dazzling light from the black jade slip hanging in the center of the hall. Her eyes suddenly brightened, and her perfect and delicate face showed a smile that made the world pale. But somehow, although the smile was perfect, it always made people feel a little uncomfortable. She turned around, bowed to the shadow above the hall, and smiled sweetly. "Master, it's done. I know that my worthless brother is cold-blooded and ruthless on the surface, but in fact, he cares about the bastard very much. Since then, my Fate Palace has him to participate in the battle, which is enough to be a holy sect. But Master, I don't understand. My Fate Palace has always been low-key. Is it too reckless?" The figure hidden in the shadow chuckled. After a moment of silence, he didn't answer but asked, "If you do so, the fate of Shengtian Shrine will inevitably fall. Aren't you afraid that your father will be furious and blame you?" "Master, you must be joking." Ling Xian's beautiful eyes were full of ambition. "You only have me, and the Fate Palace must be controlled by me in the future. Isn't it the same for Shengtian Shrine? In my opinion, the Fate Palace and Shengtian Shrine are all my forces, and the fate is gathered in me. What's the difference?" If these words were in ordinary sects, it must be rebellious. But when the Fate ancestor in the shadow heard this, he laughed more happily. "What a good child. I didn't misjudge you. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.